My name is the Random Soldier Guy, and I've been playing Roblox for quite a while now. And during my time here, I've experienced a large variety of games and genres within Roblox, as shown in my earlier and ancient eras of my YouTube channel. Yet, I still see many people online who find themselves overwhelmed at the sheer saturation of bad and mediocre games one can find on the Roblox front page. And so, I've placed it upon myself to use my objectively correct opinions to guide such railroad souls to discover what I consider to be actual good Roblox games. Forsaken is a game where you and 7 kids between the ages of 5 and 16 have been trapped by an otherworldly being, where now you're forced to play flow-free while running from various Roblox horror icons, myths, and exploiters. And oh my god, it's really fun! Created just in July 2024 by, not so great of a person, Forsaken has recently bursted onto the Roblox scene as the premier asymmetrical horror game on the platform, which means everyone and their mother is going to instantly compare this game to Dead by Daylight, because I guess any game where you run from a killer is exactly like Dead by Daylight. Regardless, Forsaken will probably be the most popular game I cover in the series, but with how well known this game already is, why not use this game spotlight to focus on a more obscure title that deserves some attention? And to answer that, it'd honestly be because Forsaken is one of the few current front page games that deserve its popularity. I'm not kidding or over-exaggerating when I say that Forsaken is probably the most fun I've had playing Roblox in a long time. And I don't mean that type of fun where you play a random game with some buddies, have your laughs, and never touch the game again. No. This Roblox game has captured my attention and keep me coming back for well past over 150 hours. A feat that even some of my current favorite games of all time have been bested or matched by. Also, I have like 900 gigabytes of Forsaken footage and I really need to free up some space. So that leads us to this video. As with the game as skill dependent and knowledge heavy as Forsaken, I want to use my experiences in playtime for good. So, if you never played Forsaken before, are new to it, or just someone who likes the game, you've come to the right place. As in this video that's going to be way longer than I probably thought it would be, I'll be going over the base mechanics of Forsaken, general tips and guidelines, and brief overviews for every survivor and killer currently in the game, including my own tips and theories on how to play as and against them. Each one of these segments will be chaptered accordingly, so if you're only interested in a specific killer or survivor, you can easily find the segment in the chapters below. I also want to quickly mention that if you enjoyed this video, or if this series has piqued your interest, if you could subscribe to the channel and like the video. I have a lofty goal of wanting to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so any kind of support would be greatly appreciated. And I know this video took forever to come out, but I have a ton more stuff coming out very soon. So any kind of support will be greatly appreciated. However, before we really begin our dive, it is ever so important to mention that this game undergoes frequent changes, as it's still technically an alpha, and chances are, this video is going to be outdated probably about a week after it comes out. As when I was writing the script over the course of 6 months by this point, I had to go back and rewrite entire sections of the segment several times, as new updates, patch notes, balance changes, and reworks happen quite frequently from when I first started playing to the most recent major change with the end of the 2025 Masquerade event. So make sure to keep this in mind if you're watching this well past the date this video comes out, where if you want to keep up with the ever-evolving state of this game, I'd recommend to join the official Discord page for previous and upcoming balance changes and patch notes. And with that, let's begin to break down the pure gameplay and mechanics of Roblox Forsaken. Now, I know many people may play this game for a couple of rounds and just think that this is Roblox Dead by Daylight, with the whole running from a killer and repairing generators, but I personally never really understood the comparison. Forsaken is not some Dead by Daylight clone or knockoff, That's called Flee the Facility. I mean, sure, there are some similarities as I've mentioned. I mean, they do share the same genre, but as we go over this game's mechanics, you'll also hopefully see why this comparison really doesn't work. Starting with how each game begins, at the start of every round, one killer is selected out of a lobby of up to 9 players, where everyone is then spread out in one of several Roblox-inspired maps after an admittedly sick-as-hell killer intro. And from here, it's like every other asymmetrical horror game. If you're a survivor, run, hide, and use your character's abilities to aid yourself or your team while repairing generators. And if you're the killer, do whatever it takes to make sure you're the only one who leaves the map alive. However, unlike in Dead by Daylight, these generators I've mentioned actually aren't a requirement for the survivors to win, as despite every map in the game having 5 generators, or 5 real generators able to play 6x6 flow free on, the only thing you need to do as a survivor to win the round is to make sure that a round timer hits 0. Everything in this game is tied to the round timer one way or another, with each generator being an optional objective that slightly lowers the round timer with every flow free puzzle completed, but with the timer increasing for every survivor that falls victim to the round's killer. And also, unlike Dead by Daylight, Forsaken runs off a very simple health system, with the base health for a survivor usually being 100. And once a killer lands an attack on a survivor, there's no injured state, no down state, no hooks, just health. And if a survivor gets hit by an attack that drops them below 0, they just die. But that doesn't mean that the only reason I do these generators is just for lowering time, as each time you complete one of the 4 puzzles in each generator, you'll also be rewarded with some cash you can spend on unlocking new characters, skins, and emotes, but also some XP to level up the survivor you're playing as. Though, leveling up a survivor or killer doesn't reward you with anything besides giving you a cool looking milestone skin every 25 levels. Really, it's just a way to flex your experience with said character. You also get these rewards for just doing your job as survivor or killer, and of course by winning the round. But I find generators to be the most consistent way to gain cash and XP, as well as something even more important: malice. Yeah, you know what I said earlier when talking about how a game starts? Yeah, I lied. A round's killer isn't randomly chosen, it's decided by whoever has the highest malice in the lobby, with playing a match giving you 1 malice, successfully doing your survivor's main ability granting 0.25 malice, and completing a generator puzzle granting 0.5 malice. God, I love flow free. Regardless, as the round continues, you may be wondering what the hell you should be doing in the middle parts of a round, when the generators have all been completed and the killer isn't currently on you. This is where the type of survivor you're playing comes in, as depending on the archetype your character falls under, you'll have a rough idea on what you should be doing when you're not actively being chased. There's currently 3 main archetypes each survivor falls under, those being Sentinels, Supports, and Survivalists. Or survivors with the ability to stun the killer, survivors that can slow the killer and extend chases via traps and healing, and survivors that are just really good at staying alive. This group being the most selfish out of the 3. And together, these 3 archetypes are supposed to work together. Supports aiding the Sentinels trying to stun or delay the killer, while Survivalists are meant to be hiding in the background, doing generators to lower the round time. However, since this is both a multiplayer game and it's on Roblox, do not expect any real teamwork or coordination with random 12-year-olds. The most you should expect to see as a killer is to see Sentinels doing their best to protect their supports. Usually out of personal gain though, so that they can receive heals when they eventually whiff their stun ability and they need some kisses on their boo-boos. But if the survivors' defenses and teamwork doesn't hold, if everyone has been slaughtered and only one survivor remains, the round then enters its most intense phase: Last Man Standing. It doesn't matter if there are 5 seconds left or 5 minutes left. When the second to last survivor falls, the auras of both survivor and killer are revealed, and the round timer is hard set to be under 90 seconds. And I have seen some very intense last man standings. The killer struggling throughout the chase, just barely hitting the buzzer beater with no time left on the clock. No! Survivors that should be dead to rights, weaving and dodging, outsmarting the killer, and barely escaping with their lives. Or it'll be the most boring, anticlimactic thing you'll ever see, with the last survivor being AFK, instantly dying, or the killer losing where the last survivor went, and spending a full minute running around an empty map. And speaking of maps, there's currently quite a lot of them. These range from absolute peak to meh, with each map being a reference to a classic Roblox map, game, or ARG, with each having an appropriate fitting theme. And some even have unique qualities about them, such as a poisonous river or water that can slow you down and make you bleed. It's also important that you learn these maps inside and out, mostly so you don't accidentally corner yourself or run into obstacles you never knew were there. This very much is a knowledge thing rather than skill, meaning that it's just something that you'll pick up over time, like where generators spawn in each map, common Taph and Builderman setup spots, and where items are usually located. And speaking of items, yes, I used the same segue twice, shut up. Within each map, 2 consumable items can be found hidden within, those being medkits and Bloxy Colas. Bloxies are pretty simple. After a pretty lengthy drink animation, you're granted 10 seconds of speed 2. Quite a huge advantage, as barring the killer chasing you also having speed stacks, you'll gain quite a lot of ground on them during a chase. This is especially crucial during last man standing, as having the killer run to you just for you to pop your speed 2 Bloxy greatly increases your odds of winning, basically making these things your get out of jail free card if you're able to get the sippy off. The other consumable found are medkits, taking a 4-night animation length to restore a very solid chunk of health back. Though, since these are pretty rare and very few spawn per round, I recommend giving them to hurt survivors or supports that can't heal themselves. But you know what they say, finders keepers and all. So, if you really want to be selfish and just keep any items you find, more power to you, I guess. But don't go out thinking that these items are a guaranteed way to win rounds, as Forsaken is a game that heavily relies on your own skill as a player. I mean, also your internet connection, but we'll talk about that later. As within Forsaken, there are 3 specific skills I'll be bringing up that, to me, are the most vital skills you're going to have to learn if you want any chance of being good at this game. Most of these skills are ones that you'll just gain over time, such as map knowledge, but knowing what to specifically practice and look out for can greatly boost your results in game. The first of these skills being the most important in stamina management. Now, there are a lot of guides and videos out there that go really in depth with what stamina management is. But to just boil it down, you see that stamina board down there? Yeah, that one. Don't let it hit 0. That's it. That's stamina management. The reasoning for this is what follows in many other games with a stamina feature. That being the recovery period to regain your stamina drastically increases when you run completely out instead of leaving just a little over. And this simple skill is key in Forsaken, as entire chases are decided via stamina management, as you may notice good players always keeping just enough distance to not get hit, turning tight corners, using map's buildings or props to their advantage, and most importantly, never letting their stamina hit 0, as running out of stamina in the middle of a chase almost always ends with you dying. This skill also heavily applies to killers, as yeah sure, even though every single killer in the game is faster than the survivors and has much more health and stamina, the easiest way to let survivors gain ground on you and waste more time that you're in very short supply of, is to let your stamina hit 0 while chasing someone, and watch as any ground you gain on them be lost because they manage your stamina better than you. But stamina isn't entirely everything, as there's going to be times when the killer catches you off guard or sneaks up on you. There's going to be times when the sheer speed advantage of a slasher or cool kid just naturally catches up. And when this happens and your back is against the wall, the second very simple skill that's next up is dodging. With the exception of Cool Kid, every killer has a pretty noticeable windup for their base attack. Combine this with stamina management, and having just enough stamina to weave left or right is invaluable in those close chases. This is the biggest reason why you should play with hitboxes turned on, giving you a visual note of how long an attack is for more consistent weaving. And while you're at it, make sure to turn on funnier ragdolls as well, for obvious reasons. However, it's important to not overthink dodging. You don't need to be a juking god to live close encounters. This ain't Secret Lab. Just keep it simple with your dodge and strafe predictions. Most killers in this game are not the greatest in the world and are usually pretty easy to read. A fact that will tie in perfectly if you are or become a Sentinel main. The inverse of this for killers is also pretty simple. Anticipating the movement and dodges of your victims is key for every single killer, though this very much is a case-by-case basis, but usually during a chase, adapting to a survivor's strafe patterns while managing your own stamina is a surefire way to take out potential threats before last man standing. And lastly, the final main skill worth discussing here is risk assessment. This is also pretty simple. Just knowing when and where to go for certain moves and plays during a round became the final piece to unlock my full potential in this game, and has become my biggest piece of enjoyment in this game, even after all these hours. Just knowing when and where to pop a Bloxy, going for generators in the final seconds of a round when someone is being chased, knowing whether or not I should risk my skin to send off for the second to last player, or to cut my losses and start building distance for last man standing. These small little interactions you find in each round is what makes Forsaken's gameplay loop so rewarding to me, as although this skill is highly knowledge based, having a Roblox game of all things properly rewarding their longtime players for taking the time to understand its mechanics is incredible, and it's the biggest reason why I keep coming back. And that to me wraps up the base and some advanced mechanics worth mentioning in Forsaken. But if you couldn't tell already, this game has a surprising amount of depth to it. I can literally spend hours rambling on about the small intricacies and interactions this game has to offer, but this video is already long enough. And I think now is about time for us to go over and learn how to play as and against the scary people you'll be seeing very often in this game. Forsaken's current roster of 7 killers. Now, you may be wondering what makes me someone worth listening to in regards to how to be a good killer. Well, if you crunch the numbers, as of writing this, I have a 77.6% win rate as killer. I've gotten every single killer to level 100, and you've already made it this far in the video. I think you can trust me by now. And even though I can't speak on personal experience, I can just kind of tell how much easier it is to rack up killer wins on a computer and mouse, as it's worth noting that I've only played Forsaken on PC. So if you're a mobile player, or God bless your soul, a console player, sorry if some of my more technical tips can't be properly replicated. But before we go through each individual killer, we should probably go over the bare basics that apply to every single killer in the game. With my first major tip being that you should play every killer in shift lock. The main reason being that it grounds your camera and therefore your attacks to the center of your screen, making your overall killer game much more consistent and being a great teacher on the ranges and hitboxes of your abilities. I'm not saying you can't be an effective or dominant killer without shift lock, but doing this prevents you from wondering how the hell you missed that attack, when it was just because you accidentally flung your hitbox the opposite way of a survivor because you weren't using shift lock. The only time shift lock is a hindrance is when using a ranged ability that can move vertically, where in this case, alongside many survivor abilities, I recommend quickly going in first person for improved accuracy. It's also worth noting that a lot of the key aspects of being a good killer are heavily tied to your overall game and especially map knowledge, whether it be knowing how to cut off survivors by taking advantage of your increased speed or killer doors, to just knowing how to properly deal with specific survivors. Being a good killer is hard, honestly. It took me several hours just to get me my first killer win, and even longer to finally crack a 50% win rate. It can be extremely frustrating when going against a competent lobby of survivors. Dude! And some killer losses still have me wondering to this day, how the hell I choked that? But learning how to take your killer losses on the chin and taking some time to analyze why you lost can go a very long way to understanding the killer you're playing and your potential as said killer. As some of these killer kits can take quite a while to fully master. My next tip may be a bit controversial, but it is perfectly normal and fine to prioritize going after certain survivors first, depending on their abilities. This applies heavily to support survivors, as really, it's just common sense that in a lobby of 8 survivors, going after a survivor that can heal others, or can set up traps and sentries to slow you down, can pay dividends later on in the round. Or if a certain survivor you know is just really cracked at the game and you just don't want to deal with them in last man standing. This ties in perfectly with my last major tip, being that it's always good to think about last man standing ahead of time. This could be anything from leaving an AFK player last, leaving a heavily weakened survivor last, or just making sure the last survivor isn't a survivalist, as some survivors are absolute beasts at last man standing, while others are completely defenseless alone. But I'll save that for when we go over each survivor. So, as long as the last survivor is a Noob or 07, you should always have a shot to clutch out the round. But that's enough general talk. Let's go over each of the current 7 killers' loadouts and abilities. Because if you have no idea what these killers can do, you aren't going to be surviving for much longer. Where is he running? The first killer everyone starts with is, of course, from famous Roblox game, Survive and Kill the Killers in Area 51, and definitely nowhere else, Jason! Slasher. Slasher is a melee-centered killer that's really good at two things: prolonged chases and getting 11-year-olds really pissy who swear that you're either targeting them or abusing janky hitboxes. Though they might have a point on that one. Slasher's entire kit revolves around using your own chasing ability and stamina management to track and cut down survivors, currently being the only killer lacking any kind of ranged projectile or trap to pin survivors down or damage them from afar. Despite this, Slasher is the best fundamental killer in the game, boasting great base stats and having an immensely easy to understand kit to break new players in on how to be a good killer. Starting with his base attack, a simple slash of his machete with a debatably broken hitbox, doing 20 damage on hit and causing 5 seconds of bleeding for extra damage. This mouse one is pretty spammable, but it can be read pretty easily during a chase, with this being compounded due to Slasher's lack of projectiles. But this doesn't mean that Slasher can't get any range on you, as if you thought a slash hitbox was a bit egregious, well then, get ready for what easily is Slasher's most bulky move, the head. Keybind being Q, the head works as a small lunge that's perfect for tagging a survivor just out of reach of your base attack, dealing a flat 20 damage. Sounds pretty decent, and although the game kind of hints at the head being used as a finisher move, with it actually decapitating survivors if they die from it, and with it being an in-game achievement as well. And although that is valid, especially with how egregious that lunge hitbox is during a chase, the head also works as a beautiful shutdown move, with it deflecting Helpless for 8 entire seconds. Helpless is an effect that prevents survivors from using any of their abilities, making it so that they can really only run until the effect is over, making the head to be a very viable opening attack, especially against overconfident sentinels eager to stun you. However, this attack is very telegraphed, and regardless if Slasher lands the behead or not, it leaves him with slowness 2 for 2 seconds, making missing a behead to be that much more punishing. And knowing when to use behead, like many things in this game, is very knowledge based, as over time, you'll get the gist of the range of your attacks, when to use them, and who to use them against. And much like his base attack, you also need to know how to properly aim it to cover the most ground, lest you want to end up with some guy a Forsaken joking montage. Finally moving on to his next ability, being my personal favorite of his in Gashing Wound. Keybind being E, Gashing Wound is an all or nothing attack that, if landed, will cause an uninterruptible animation of a Slasher absolutely brutalizing his victim, dealing a whopping base 50 damage if landed. That's at least half or over half the health of the majority of survivors. This move can be a bit tricky to land though, with it only being effective against survivors with 0 stamina, if they're cornered, punishing whiffs, or, of course, sneaking up on survivors chilling or doing generators. Slasher is especially effective here with sneak attacks, mostly thanks to his passive of Mute, which makes Slasher's tear radius noticeably smaller compared to the other killers, usually meaning that if you're on a generator and hear Slasher's theme, you're about 1.5 seconds away from having a machete rammed down your throat. And I don't know why, but this to me makes Slasher really the only scary killer in the game, in the sense of the amount of times I've been jump scared by this damn guy. Seriously, Slasher today is still responsible for the only time this game has ever seriously scared me. Oh my god! I forgot I was like, wait, he's probably coming from the poison side, huh? Gashing Wound Mute combo aside, this move remains a Slasher's most punishing move, making being a sentinel against him just that much harder, as Slasher is the greatest whiff punisher in the game thanks to Gashing Wound. And man, let me tell you, there is nothing more satisfying than just throwing this move out there as a risky play and hitting it big. Comes a little predictable after like the 4th time you do it. The last ability in Slasher's kit is easily his most technical, being his R ability in Raging Pace. After a short animation, Slasher becomes enraged for 14 seconds, and the aura, or location, of the nearest survivor is revealed, making this Slasher's only way to find hidden survivors. And while in this state, Slasher is kept at a walk speed of 19.5 studs a second, while his sprint is disabled and stamina kept at 70. Being in a rage also makes Slasher immune to all stuns and makes all of his attacks do significantly more damage, with his space slash doing 25 damage and adding a huge lunge to the move, Behead doing 35, and Gashing Wound doing 70 damage. 70 damage! Slasher's enraged state ends after 14 seconds or when any attack is made. But to the newer player, this ability may seem a bit useless, especially in comparison to his other abilities. However, Raging Pace is what really makes Slasher a force to be reckoned with, and mastery of this ability is the main difference between average slashers and scary slashers. There's a lot of ways to use Raging Pace. However, in my experience, it's the most effective in these 3 specific ways. 1. When chasing a survivor and you both run out of stamina, using Raging Pace is not only faster than walking, but you gain stamina to around 90 before it slowly drains to 70. This combined with the lunge with an enraged slash, and you can gain so much ground on whoever you're chasing, making extending or even finishing chases much more manageable. 2. Kind of similar to the first technique, but done more effectively against survivors you know have a lot of stamina. Using your 70 stamina cap to force survivors to waste their stamina to gain or regain a stamina advantage. 3. And this last technique being kind of niche, being to use Raging Pace to counter full stun lobbies or overconfident sentinels. As you'd be surprised how many players forget that Slasher cannot be stunned while enraged, allowing for immensely easy punishes. As every now and then, you can trade up just fully counter a sentinel stun attempt by activating your Raging Pace at just the right time, giving you that delicious 70 damage swing. Yeah! Overall, Slasher's kit is a very solid one, lacking any real flaws besides its lack of projectiles, forcing Slasher mains to be efficient in their stamina usage, which can be rough for newer killers still learning the game's mechanics. But I still believe Slasher is the best killer to start out with due to his simplicity, giving new players a great crash course of how to play killer, and giving them the option to master him, or to switch to a different killer that, you know, isn't the easiest to loop around a big rock. But just in case you're curious of how I believe you should be playing Slasher, following my rule of targeting supports first, most of my Slasher wins revolve around carefully targeting one survivor at a time, countering sentinel misplays with Gashing Wound, using Raging Pace when appropriate, and, most importantly of all, finishing your chases. The biggest mistake I always see in newer slashers, or basins as I call them, because he used to be called Jason, Jason with no skin being a base Jason, basin. The biggest issue I see with these newer players is that they nearly always switch off to an entirely different survivor during a chase. And despite there being many children in this game who will cry that, "You're targeting me, you're targeting me," if you play Slasher this way, just know that that's how you're supposed to play Slasher! Seriously, time is money, and money is calling. And the first step you need to take to finally get some killer wins is to pick up that damn phone and finish your chases. And I'm not kidding when I say this, as the moment I stopped letting survivors live on low percentages and began carefully choosing who to target first, the killer wins started rolling in. The main difficulty from the strategy simply just being going against competent sentinels to actually do their job instead of just hiding in a corner like a pig. But this problem solves itself once you learn the main counters for each sentinel, in combination with Behead and Raging Pace to cut down anyone in your way. Seriously, despite his lack of projectiles, Slasher has a counter for just about every survivor. However, this sentiment is only really about survivor abilities, as, thankfully, Slasher is the most straightforward killer to play against. I mean, countering Slasher is a lot easier said than done, as it really just boils down to having good stamina management and distance, which I guess goes for every killer in the game, but Slasher especially, as his whole thing is closing the gap in prolonged chases, usually meaning that most of your deaths against Slasher are either caused by him getting the jump on you, or your own piss poor stamina management that you're just gonna blame on hitboxes to make yourself feel better. And stating the obvious here, having max HP during a Slasher chase helps a lot in extending chases, as usually even if you have good stamina management, most competent Slashers will be able to at least get up ahead off to chip away at your health. This counterplay also makes Slasher pretty weak in last man standing, as going against any survivor with full health across the map is usually where I've lost a lot of my Slasher games, giving an even stronger reason as to why you need to pick your last man standing target carefully, regardless of the killer you're playing as. All things considered, Slasher is a very good killer. Despite his many flaws on paper, his sheer speed and lethality combined with how easy he is to play goes to show that Slasher really is the Tim Duncan of Forsaken killers. Moving on to a killer with a somewhat different playstyle leads us to the killer poster boy of Forsaken, the infamous Cool Kid. Based off the real-life Roblox exploiting group Team Cool Kid was an actual Roblox user, being the alt account of Team Cool Kid creator 007N7, who I'll be referring to as 07 from now on, who is actually a playable survivor in the game. The Forsaken devs actually built some lore around these two, with Cool Kid in 07 having a father-son relationship with some pretty small neat interactions like an absolute peak last man standing theme, custom voice lines, and even a different kill animation for Cool Kid's milestone skins. A lot of the characters in Forsaken actually do have some relation to each other, and although I could spend some time going more into Forsaken's lore, this video is strictly about the gameplay and mechanics of Forsaken. If you want to learn more about this game's lore, I heavily recommend reading up on the wiki, or to watch a YouTube video where they read up on the wiki for you. Getting into Cool Kid's actual kit, and like slashers, it's a very easy kit to understand compared to the next 3 killers. So simple in fact, his base mouse 1 is literally just a punch. And although it doesn't leave any kind of secondary effect, the attack still does 26 damage, and is hardly telegraphed. Already pretty lethal, especially with Cool Kid sharing the same run speed as Slasher. However, unlike Slasher, Cool Kid actually has a projectile, being his Q, Corrupt Nature. Wherever he's looking, Cool Kid launches a break able to phase through walls, dealing 15 damage to survivors while also giving them slowness and revealing their aura. With this being Cool Kid's sole projectile, learning how to properly aim with it is a must for Cool Kid mains, being able to do everything from being a finisher, comboing sentries, kill confirms, and chip damage. However, Corrupt Nature is nearly always overshadowed by Cool Kid's other abilities, and for good reason, as his E, Walk Speed Override, used to be, and still arguably is, the most bullshit move in the entire game. What?! Thank God the devs reworked it a while ago. As before, this ability worked as a flying lunge in one direction, inflicting 25 damage on contact and burning one for 10 seconds to round it out to be a nice 40 damage for a move with basically no delay or wind up. This made Cool Kid such a pain to deal with, as yes, although this move is super punishable for whiffing, usually causing the Cool Kid to go flying way past their target and resetting the chase. But with this move basically having no wind up back then, any competent Cool Kid will usually punch into Override to deal 70 damage in like 2 seconds. Not even mentioning that this effect given by Walk Speed Override, Burning, is the only status effect capable of killing a survivor. Not bleeding, or corrupted, or poisoned, but burning. This would lead to this very awkward dance against any Cool Kid player, usually causing me to suddenly zig or zag in hopes of baiting out this busted ability, usually costing unnecessary stamina usage and the end result already being decided. Thank God they made this move so much more fair, as now, Walk Speed Override has a short but much more forgiving windup of 0.5 seconds. Doesn't sound like much, but the difference is night and day. To balance this out, Walk Speed Override is noticeably much faster now, does 5 more damage in total, and has insane knockback against anyone it hits, making this ability feel a lot more fair and actually causing Cool Kid mains to have to lead their shots and read survivor movement instead of having a cheap 40 damage button. Thankfully, Cool Kid's last ability is his most fair with Pizza Delivery, where pressing R summons 2 goons to automatically chase down the nearest survivor to him, dealing roughly 20 damage in total, as well as giving slowness 2 for 3 seconds if they actually manage to tag anyone. No! The reason I say this is fair is due to Cool Kid's biggest weakness in his kit, as out of all the current killers in the game, Cool Kid has no active tracking ability, or basically just lacking an ability that automatically reveals the aura of a nearby hidden survivor. This means that Cool Kid mains have to rely on pizza delivery bots to act as a compass to find the nearest survivor, as finding any hidden survivor can be a real challenge for Cool Kid, especially if it's any one of these 3 guys. And besides having to learn this, Cool Kid is a remarkably easy killer to play. His simple kit is stupidly lethal, even after his reworks, as the main trick of being a good Cool Kid has remained the same. Hit your overrides. Seriously, that's really it. Being able to land a move that does 45 damage, it turns out to be key to winning games as him. Go figure. Had an overfarm on him. But that doesn't mean you should spam it despite its short 20-second cooldown, as if you have a survivor cornered and they start doing funky movement like a TF2 spy main, don't take the bait. Chances are they're trying to matador you into whiffing your override to get away, where thankfully this has a very simple counter, beating them to death. I'm not kidding, that's how oppressive Walk Speed Override is. You have to respect this move even if the Cool Kid doesn't use it, which leads to people often overthinking their Cool Kid interactions, leading to moments where you can just pummel some survivors to death and just never use your override. Combine this with knowing how to aim your Corrupt Nature properly, and you'll be stacking wins very easily. as long as you don't leave any survivalists alive for last man standing. Because if you lose sight of the final survivor and your pizza boys either got bugged or they're on cooldown, good luck, man. The only way is to just get lucky and wait to see if your stamina bar drops, as killers don't lose any stamina if they aren't in the presence of a survivor, so losing stamina can be your only sign that the final survivor is nearby. And quite obviously, this does greatly help when it comes to countering Cool Kid, as the main strategy mostly remains the same, being to bait out his walks with override and making sure not to get hit by his corrupt nature, mostly due to the slowness it gives you. As even with the override rework, Cool Kid is still able to put out a ridiculous amount of burst damage with his abilities. However, now with walks with override being much more punishable and Cool Kid's lack of active tracking, dealing with this 10-year-old is a lot more fair now. But honestly, Cool Kid to me is my least favorite killer to go against and play as. A lot of the kills you get as Cool Kid rarely feel deserved or satisfying, and going against him is more frustrating rather than interesting or challenging. Maybe his Russian archetype just isn't my cup of tea. As despite there being many people who consider Cool Kid to be the best killer in the game, this notoriety is mostly due to just how busted out and fun it was to go against him pre-rework and nerfs. And although I do understand where many people are coming from when they say Cool Kid is the best killer, I hard disagree, as the upcoming killers we'll be going over may be much more technical. However, their kits are frankly insane. One of these technical killers we'll be talking about being John Doe, based on the infamous Roblox myth of the second Roblox account ever made, destroying Roblox on March 18th, 2017. And since this obviously didn't come to fruition, it means we got the bad ending. John Doe is a drastically different killer compared to Slasher and Cool Kid, as his playstyle relies on trapping, cornering, and pinning survivors down through his abilities. And I believe me using the phrase relies on is a gross understatement, as John Doe is quite the chunky boy, being noticeably slower than Slasher and Cool Kid, meaning that you really need to use his abilities well to succeed playing as him. His kit is easily the most technical out of the current 7 killers, which makes him the hardest killer to be good at, which often leads to many players calling John Doe to be the weakest killer. But trust me, after getting this guy to level 100, I think those who say this may just be dog shit at the game. Starting with his base attack, John Doe's slash really isn't anything too special, with it doing 28 damage and having a much more telegraphed animation compared to the previous 2 killers. However, unlike Cool Kid, his slash usually leads into his best passive being effective, that being Natural Malevolence, a passive that gives John Doe a Slither IO type trail wherever he steps, with any survivor that steps on it getting damage over time with the corrupted effect. This usually makes any close-up juking or sentinel stuns resulting in them taking just a bit of chip damage, sometimes doing enough to turn 4 shots into 3 shots. But these 2 abilities don't even pale in comparison to the sheer importance of these next 2 abilities. John Doe's bread and butter, if you will, those being Corrupt Energy and Digital Footprint. The first here is Corrupt Energy, an ability where after a short animation of John Doe stabbing the ground, 27 massive spikes quickly rise up from the ground, being able to be steered with your camera to pierce nearby survivors or cut off areas of the map. This ability is easily John Doe's most important one to master, as hitting any survivor with it grants you speed, allowing you to close distance using the stamina regained during the ability's animation or for the ability to be used as a finisher move. This is the more aggressive way of using Corrupt Energy though, with the more passive way of cutting off areas of the map being my favorite way to use the ability. However, this unfortunately leads to the inherent weakness of John Doe, that being the sheer amount of map knowledge you need to effectively trap survivors, being the biggest reason why newer players come to the conclusion that John Doe is the worst killer in the game. But once you learn how to effectively trap a survivor on any map, is when John Doe becomes really fun, as forcing survivors to either juke you for 14 seconds until the spikes come down, or having to run through the gauntlet through you is so damn satisfying, as long as you don't leave any holes in your spike lines. But Corrupt Energy is only John Doe's bread. His butter, well, is the key that makes John Doe an absolute menace to deal with. This being John Doe's best ability, Digital Footprint. This ability works by John Doe stomping on the ground like an angry toddler, leaving a black swirly trap in its place, and if any survivor steps in it, the victim receives Corrupted 1 for 10 seconds, equivalent to 20 damage, Slowness 2 for 10 seconds, and they're over revealed to John Doe, and vice versa. John Doe also received speed 1 for 10 seconds during this time, making these traps John Doe's biggest lifeline for kill confirms. Not to mention the 8-second cooldown on these things, also a lifespan on them, and you can have 3 digital footprints active at a time. And you can really just cut off any area of the map you like. The only trick to this ability is where to place them, once again requiring some level of map knowledge, and unfortunately leading to John Doe's biggest pitfall that I alluded to earlier. That being with John Doe being extremely map dependent. What I mean by this really just has to do with the common looping or setup areas, which are just locations that survivors like to gravitate around, such as the ball pit and horror hotel, the 2 high points and glass houses, on top of the castle in Brandon's place. You get the idea. Digital footprint can cut these areas entirely off, either forcing survivors to dance around them or step onto the trap, practically being a death sentence for anyone you're chasing, unless they're a sentinel or have a crazy good juking ability. Realistically, you want to place and replace these things down as often as you can, as usually in a match, some idiot is just gonna walk through your trap in the middle of a chase, resulting in free chip damage and 10 free seconds of speed that's granted to you wherever you are in the map. But as I said just a bit ago, despite how strong this ability is, it is so map dependent on how effective it is. As put a John Doe in a map like Pirates Bay, Underground War, or, God forbid, Planet Voss. And they'll quickly learn just how much they need digital footprint to properly crowd control, as these wide open maps with very little trapping locations except for generators leave you completely relying on using corrupt energy offensively to catch up due to your lack of speed. Wait, is this why everyone draws John Doe fat? Luckily, John Doe's last ability eases the pain a little in 4-4 error, being the best tracking ability in the game, as it just reveals the aura of every survivor on the map without needing a condition or giving you a negative status effect. And that's usually all the ability was originally used for, until John Doe's most recent controversial change that happened a while ago, reworking John Doe's second passive, Unstoppable. Originally, this was a very powerful passive, allowing John Doe to only be stunned for a max of 2 seconds, while also granting speed once the stun ended. That was until this amazing passive was massively nerfed. You now only get the benefits of Unstoppable if stunned during the animation or duration for either corrupt energy or 4-4 error, encouraging players to try and use these abilities as like a ghetto parry mechanic in anticipation of predictable guest and Shedletsky stuns. However, the fault in this lies in the fact that this really quietly on paper has the player do 3 times the amount of effort for a passive to work exactly the same as it did before the change. If anyone on the dev team somehow finds this video, I am begging them to lean more into this idea, to maybe give John Doe speed 2 instead of 1, or to increase the amount of base speed 1 on top of the additional time given for each send on the round for a successful activation of Unstoppable. As in its current state as of writing this just looks like an unnecessary nerf to what many people already consider to be Forsaken's worst killer. And for when going against John Doe, it's a lot easier to outpace the fatty and dodge his swipes, mostly thanks to how telegraphed this mouse 1 is, and due to him only being slightly faster than you compared to Slasher and Cool Kid. This really just means that you only need to dodge his spikes, something made a lot harder if you're going against a John Doe with more than 90 brain cells.
No! No!
Oh,
that was tricky. The wiggle.
Seriously, sometimes a good John Doe just gets you. Nearly all of his kills feel very earned due to the over-reliance of his technical abilities and map knowledge. That is, until some smooth skin across the map walks into the most obvious digital footprint ever and dooms you. Wow, it's kind of like I'm being Forsaken! Lastly, like I said, just be cautious as to where you're stepping, as to not accidentally activate his digital footprint, damaging you for 20 health and either griefing yourself or some poor guy across the map that now has to deal with the speed 1 John Doe. Overall, I actually consider John Doe to have the second best kit on paper. Keyword being on paper, as due to John Doe being the most technical killer and his abilities heavily relying on the map the round is on, the general community's opinion of John Doe has been very split to say the least. However, don't let that dissuade you from trying this guy out. His kit is nothing to scoff at and is easily the most rewarding killer to win as, especially when you actually manage to snag a win in Old Planet Voss. Holy sh**, that map was so ass! Well. Finally time to talk about my main, the killer with the most ridiculous kit in the game, the legend and my man, 1x, 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 1. I'm just calling him 1x from now on. Based on an alt account of famous Roblox admin John Shedletsky, 1x is the premier range killer in the game, boasting 2 powerful range attacks and insane map pressure, in exchange for having the slowest killer running speed and a weaker primary attack. Said primary attack being 1x as slash, dealing 20 damage and giving poison as an effect, basically being a worse slasher slash. Luckily, it also provides what used to be the most annoying effect in the game, glitched. Before the slasher update, being hit with any of 1x's moves would basically short your screen with visual aids for a short moment, being so bad that they even added a setting to lessen the effect of glitched for people who can't handle these kind of flashing lights that well. But you wouldn't turn that on if you weren't epileptic, right? You wouldn't use a disability setting for a gameplay advantage, right? Regardless, glitch not only affects your view of your health and stamina, this being a lot more fair now, as it only impedes your stamina management when you're under the effect. A trade-off I think everyone in the community would gladly take compared to how this effect used to work. Moving to 1x's more important abilities, we'll start with his Q. Yeah, mass infection. After a short windup of 1x rattling his bones, he throws forward a wide projectile that does a decent chunk of damage a distance away, while dealing heavy damage if a victim is hit up close. It is important to note that this attack is very audible from anywhere in the map, and it can go through any surface. So if you hear 1x's funky rattle and, I don't know, or doing a generator, I highly recommend that you make it a habit of getting off said generator whenever you hear this sound. As even if you specifically aren't getting targeted, the last thing you want is a stray mass infection doming you. And for 1x's second range attack, well, it's of course, yeah, entanglement. Being his E, entanglement shoots out 2 smaller blades from where 1x is looking, where, if a survivor is hit, they are dealt 10 damage and become frozen in place via slowness 10 for 3 seconds, as pop-ups appear on screen, prompting a quick little mini game where you need to close out the pop-ups or wait for the slowness 10 to run out so that you can move again. Just remember that you actually need to physically press or click on the pop-ups for them to go away, lest you want to end up like me the first time I got entangled.
My day is ruined.
Oh.
Oh, this guy sucks, don't worry.
Hey, so you wanted to get targeted? Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
You want to get mixed?
What?
He stunned me!
Click the.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do.
You gotta close the pop.
Yeah, and he died instantly.
You gotta close the pop-up, man.
Landing an entanglement also gives 1x speed 2 for 3 seconds and highlights anyone hit. Already sounds pretty busted, but this move used to be so much worse, as it also made that you had to do the pop-up minigame as the only way to escape, as the clip I just showed demonstrates. Yet, even with the devs finally addressing this ridiculous kit, entanglement still is 1x's most important ability to master, as the amount of kill confirms this move gets you is insane. Most of your chases will begin and end with these 2 abilities, and with them having pretty short cooldowns, even if you're going against a competent survivor, you'll have plenty of time to read and punish your movements and strafes. 1x's second to last ability is arguably even better than John Doe's 4-4 error, with actually I think it's called Unstable Eye. After an animation of 1x ripping out his eye, the location of all survivors are revealed for 7 seconds, while granting 1x speed for 5 seconds. Sounds very busted, especially with this move only having a 25-second cooldown, but the drawback being that Unstable Eye also gives 1x blindness 3 for the same time as the speed, basically requiring you to rely on the aura of nearby survivors as your screen becomes heavily blurred during the duration of blindness. And all of this already sounds like a monster kit, but there's still one more ability 1x has. And this single ability is able to push 1x's kit from being very strong to being absolutely bonkers. Rejuvenate the Rotten. This ability becomes ready to use the moment 1x kills any survivor, as when activated, 1x resurrects all survivors he has killed into rotten zombies to serve as his minions. These guys spawn exactly where a survivor died, and although they don't seem too menacing, usually just standing still or wandering aimlessly until you get too close, they still aren't to be underestimated, as the speed of these little guys are shockingly fast, and once they're on you, they are relentless, until you run for like 2 seconds and they become docile again. Now so far, this seems like a mediocre ability, and I thought so too, until I learned that 1x can actually kill his minions in exchange for speed 1 for 10 seconds. This is where the real bullshit of this ability begins. As, hypothetically, if you're in a full lobby and as last man standing, most 1x players are going to be able to use this ability to not only have 7 minions to provide map-wide pressure, but they can also use these minions to close the distance of any survivor with the speed 1 tech. Now, any killer with access to speed is already very strong, but there used to be a slight oversight with this ability, as 1x used to be able to stack speed with each minion kill, being capped at speed 3. I'm not kidding, for the longest time, if you killed 3 minions in a row, you are given speed 3 for 10 seconds! How did it take this long to nerf this guy? Even after the speed 3 memes were found shot dead in the Bronx, this ability still easily makes 1x the best killer for last man standing, and, in my opinion, the best killer in the game. As I have never felt more hopeless in a match when going against a competent 1x. As bar me becoming a clutch god or the 1x choking, there is usually very little you can do against 1x. The margin of error against this guy is so slim, yet it isn't impossible. When going against 1x, there are 2 main weaknesses he has that you're going to need to learn to stand a chance against this monstrous kid. Those being 1x's lack of speed and elevation. 1x being the slowest killer in the game, being only 1 step faster than any survivor, allows you to consistently outrun a 1x with only a small amount of stamina management needed. This really makes the main interactions that you'll have with the 1x being mind games, such as when and where the 1x will use their entanglement and mass infection. The main downside to this interaction though is the fact that you need to have your camera positioned to look behind you to read these incoming attacks, which makes running into dead ends and objects very common, unless you have these maps memorized. But despite this advantage, this is where most inexperienced 1x users usually falter, as unfortunately, being good at 1x does require you to have at least a 7th grade reading level, something that the majority of the player base is still a couple of years away from achieving.
Who put that there? Why did you put that there, man?
I say this as most competent survivors are going to easily outread a 1x, dodging entanglements and mass infections with no sweat, barring a lucky shot. These interactions being something that every 1x main is going to have to learn to consistently win games, being able to read the dodge patterns of competent survivors. But even if you personally can easily dodge and outread a decent 1x player, it won't really matter if everyone else on your team are all bums and they all die in under 2 minutes. And usually in this case, you can't really do anything. Like seriously man, please have some mercy! Don't feel too bad though. This insane kid is what makes 1x the best killer in the game. And who knows, maybe with every death against a 1x, you'll learn and get better at the matchup. On paper at least. They f***ing did it again. If you want to know why this video took forever to come out besides me being overly ambitious, this is why. And honestly, I'm done rewriting and revoicing segments for this video. Long story short, 1x is getting a rework on his entire kit. It's nothing too crazy, he's not getting any new or different moves, and the way to counter him is going to remain the same. But all of his abilities, especially entanglement, are looking to be massively tweaked. But I'm way too burnt out to go over this in depth. So here's all the current proposed changes the Forsaken devs are currently messing with. These changes at least look interesting, but like I said, I really want to move on to other projects, so I won't be covering these changes individually. But don't worry, this is far from the last time I'm going to have to interrupt myself to show everyone just how late I am with this video. That has to be fake.
Messes with your
Yep, knew it.
It messes with your timer.
And lastly, the Killer Suits edition took so long it pushed this video back 2 entire months, Noli! Based on an early Roblox urban legend, Noli is one of, if not the most technically complex killer to be released so far, introducing entirely new systems and mechanics such as hallucinations, a mechanic that deals with client-side events depending on the amount of hallucination stacks a survivor gets. Noli's hallucinations can be as harmless as just altering the round timer with 1 stack of hallucinations, seeing fake pizzas and dispensers on the map with 2 stacks, to seeing a figment of Noli himself using abilities and trying to murder you. Now, it's usually pretty easy to know what's a hallucination and what's real, but sometimes, man, they really get you. Oh, that was a fake one. Getting hallucination stacks are done by 2 ways. The first is under Noli's second passive in Prankster, a passive that adds a number of fake generators in every single map, where completing a puzzle on a fake generator grants hallucination stacks the more you do them. Luckily, there are a ton of signs that the generator you're doing might be a fake one. Everything from a number wire being skipped, to the rewards being wrong, and time not going down properly for each puzzle done. But that all involves actually doing the generator and getting hallucination stacks, instantly notifying Noli where you are, as any survivor that has hallucination stacks is instantly revealed to Noli. So to avoid this, the best way to know if a generator is fake is by physically looking at the wires protruding from the generator model. If you see that the wires look scratched up or have some kind of like black on them, it's a fake generator. So unless the devs change how fake gens work, this should be your go-to method to know if a generator is fake. Just remember that fake generators only spawn if you're going against Noli. But now to Noli's main abilities. Noli's mouse 1 does a clean 25 damage with a forward stab. However, this wind-up animation is very noticeable, a fact that stays consistent with the rest of Noli's kit. This includes Noli's only projectile, being his E or Nova ability, having a similar wind-up to his mouse 1, where Noli throws his Void Star forward, detonating with a massive hitbox around it, dealing 15 damage to anyone hit by it, and pulling them to the center of the Void Star. This projectile can also be detonated mid-air, like the detonator from TF2, in case you couldn't get a direct hit with it. This ability really just works as some extra damage and ground coverage. It can be pretty easy to dodge, but when it gets you, oh, it gets you. You could do some dirty stuff with Nova, being a reliable combo with his mouse 1, to even pulling survivors off high areas and making them run into stuff. Seriously, pretty fun to use. This leads perfectly into Noli's most fun and terrifying ability, his Q, Void Rush, where, after a short windup, Noli enters a cool kid like override, though with the mortifying ability to actually steer where you go.
That hit?
Upon contact with any survivor, you bash him for 10 damage and 2 stacks of hallucination, while allowing you to use a Void Rush again shortly after. Hitting the same victim twice, or any survivor with at least 2 stacks of hallucination, is where the real damage is, dealing a total of 40 damage or sometimes even more if you ping-ponged off several survivors by ramming them into the ground. Though this ability gets cancelled by crashing into a wall, getting stunned, or just letting go of Q. Dodging Void Rush can be an absolute nightmare, though not impossible, as dodging this ability really comes down to the map you're on, where having tight corners or obstacles being a saving grace if you can get behind one in time. But this ability is also ridiculous for movement, where although you can't gain stamina while Void Rushing, you go so stupid fast and go so stupid far, it makes closing the distance on any survivor a piece of cake, giving Noli the easiest map-wide pressure out of any killer, especially with his last ability of Observant, that allows Noli to teleport to any generator on the map. This not only works to jump unsuspecting survivors or gain free distance, but Observant has a unique ability of giving hallucination stacks depending on how far away survivors are from where you teleported to. This works as Noli's main wall hacks, as although this ability is already on cooldown when the round starts, you should be using this as often as you can. Not only to spot your next victim, but to give consistent hallucination stacks off, which always has the off chance to have a survivor believe that you're just a figment of their imagination. Which one's real? Which one's real? Which one's real? Needless to say, Noli is a pretty complicated killer, and to me, fitting perfectly in the middle of killer rankings of being the most fair killer to play as and against. I mean, yeah, sure, going against Noli is honestly super annoying with fake generators and his hallucinations just being minor inconveniences. But with all of his attacks being super telegraphed and all of his killing potential relying on comboing his abilities together, it leads to this really fun balance of skill and knowledge to properly play as and against them. I took too long to make this video. In the middle of editing. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewrite a couple of things. The current latest killer to be released is the big dog himself, Guess 666. Originally based off the classic Roblox myth before being taken out back in 2017, Sixer is an absolute imposing force in the game. Quite literally. Look how f***ing huge they are. This is Sixer's most obvious feature. Yet, packed with them is easily one of this game's most intriguing kits. As to balance out just how goddamn huge this dog is, Sixer not only has the same running speed as 1X, but has been given an entire new mechanic in Blood to deal with. To explain what this mechanic is as easily as I can, it's best to tie with one of Sixer's passives, Bloodhound. Bloodhound is a passive that grants Sixer the unique status condition, Hemorrhage, an effect that prevents survivors from healing past a certain health total, as shown by vines covering your health bar in the corner. And this effect lasts quite a while, by the way, currently being set at 90 seconds as of writing this. The only two ways to get rid of Hemorrhage is by using a medkit or praying to God that one of the randoms you're playing with has the mental capacity to read, being able to be free from this ailment with the help of a fellow survivor. Now this kit already sounds pretty annoying, but the main reason why I bring this up is due to an additional effect Hemorrhage does, as any survivor with this ailment slowly drops blood orbs over time, being able to be seen and picked up by Sixer, tying perfectly into the rest of Sixer's kit. Starting the round with 0 blood and with a max cap of 150, blood is a spendable currency for Sixer's abilities that's gained by landing any of your attacks, killing survivors, and of course by collecting blood orbs. The first way to spend this blood is actually through Sixer's base attack, Carving Slash. Using their big ass claws to swipe at a survivor, this move does a clean, flat 20 damage while granting 10 blood for each successful hit. However, at the cost of 10 blood, if you hold down mouse 1, Sixer follows up this base attack with another, Eviscerate. Almost acting like a goddamn slasher per head, this follow-up causes Sixer to lunge forward, dealing 10 damage, giving Hemorrhage during any one hit, and giving 15 blood for a successful hit, as well as reducing Eviscerate's 8-second cooldown to 4. Pretty damn bonkers right off the bat. But thankfully, it's worth noting that, like Slasher now, a miss of Eviscerate results in slowness, meaning that Eviscerate isn't just free movement anymore. But even before this minor nerf, it's still quite a struggle to chase down survivors, where, to address this, Sixer took a page from Cool Kids and Noli's book, having a dash attack of their own, Demonic Pursuit. Holding down Q as a windup, letting go launches Sixer forward, where, if contact is made, causes Sixer to tear into them, dealing 5 huge slashes, with how long the windup was held for deciding its total damage, between 26 and 40 health. A little low if you spam click it, but if you ask me, with how fast you zoom with Demonic Pursuit, it's somewhat fair. What's this? What? What do you mean this guy can jump? Oh!
That's insane! No, that's so cool, dude.
Yeah, instead of looking straight ahead, if you look up while releasing this ability, Guess 666 leaps into the air and slams down like Prime LeBron. This is crazy! And although it can be a little finicky to land at first, this shuts down so many looping areas. It's just so damn satisfying. But like Walk Speed Override, whiffing this ability is pretty damn punishing, as if you get matadored or just misread your target, you'll go flying way past them and reset the chase. A chase that Sixer finds himself quite disadvantaged at. Luckily, their next ability and passive aids in this chase a lot. Said ability being Infernal Cry, a projectile scream that Sixer unleashes after a short windup. Any survivor hit by the shriek is given blindness and their camera forcefully turned to Sixer's location. But that's only the survivor's end, as the main boon from landing this move highlights them for 12 seconds. Now, highlighting a survivor isn't anything too special. However, this is where Sixer's second and final passive comes in, Manic Fixation. This passive works by granting Sixer a speed boost while near any survivor highlighted by any of their abilities, tying beautifully with Infernal Cry to not only disorient the survivor you're chasing, but to help gradually build speed against them during a chase. Manic Fixation also ties in with Sixer's last ability, Blood Rush, acting as their X-ray ability. Sixer sniffs the air and highlights every survivor on the map, the length of said highlight being dependent on how far away a survivor is from Sixer. This is best used to not only find hidden survivors, but also as a great way to gain some stamina to resume or begin a chase, being similar to 1X's Unstable Eye, though without the blindness. And that about wraps up Guess 666. Honestly, a little complicated, but honestly, extremely solid and... Oh, who am I bullshitting? We all know Sixer has one more very important ability. As if Sixer reaches their blood cap of 150, their X-ray ability, Blood Rush, turns into what now easily is the most ridiculous ability in the entire game, Blood Hunt. Upon activation, every survivor on the map hears a unique blood-curdling screech as Blood Hunt begins. The entire map suddenly becomes enveloped in a hellish red-black color palette, and the map's music is silenced. And with the activation of this ability, Guest 666 receives the following buffs for 25 entire seconds. A speed buff of 4%, their terror radius reduced by 50%, the location of all survivors revealed to them every 5 seconds, Sixer being unable to be stunned during Blood Hunt, with any successful stun attempt only giving them slowness 2 for 3 seconds and helpless for 2 seconds. Infernal Cry now being able to do 10 damage, giving 2 extra seconds of blindness, and giving Sixer speed for 4 seconds and strength for 8 seconds. And lastly, the game is unable to end during Blood Hunt. Needless to say, this ability is broken, and makes Sixer a killer who relies on spreading hemorrhage and stringing together weak moves into a delicious 4-piece combo into a stacking machine. It is straight up unfair to go against a Blood Hunt Guest 666, although thankfully this ability can't be activated during Last Man Standing, though it can be brought into Last Man Standing for 7 entire seconds really, if you stack successfully, as each time you kill a survivor during Blood Hunt, all cooldowns are instantly reset and the duration of Blood Hunt is increased by 15 seconds. This ability is just gross. Though it's worth noting that even though it feels like a JoJo-style time freeze during Blood Hunt, time does still continue regularly. It's just that, like I said, the game can't end while Blood Hunt is activated. Overall, despite Sixer's broken Blood Hunt ability, Guest 666 requires a tasteful blend of skill and kit knowledge to be effective as them. You aren't given the base sets of Slasher, the burst damage of Cool Kid, the kill confirms of 1x, the trap ability of John Doe, or the map-wide pressure of Noli. It's completely up to you on how to string these moves together to pick apart any team of survivors. Or, of course, just activate Blood Hunt when you just want some free kills. But despite all this glaze I have for this kit, all of this praise has been a result of analyzing this kit on paper, as there is this one simple trick any survivor can do that turns this killer that easily should be top 3 into the literal worst killer to play as. And this simple trick, this one-size-fits-all approach to counter this giant scary monster, is running around a big rock for 3 minutes. Look, I haven't talked about looping in depth yet. I know it's a fundamental part of any asymmetrical horror game, but oh my god, Sixer gets looped so easily. I have never been more miserable playing a Forsaken killer. It honestly makes so much sense that the dev team only had 3 days to balance this guy. Because if you go against any survivor who's a competent looper, your counterplay as Sixer is laughably pathetic compared to her fellow peers. At least Slasher has raging pace, a thin frame, and shares the fastest run speed with Cool Kid. At least Cool Kid has a wall-facing projectile that inflicts slowness and minions to cut off exit routes. John Doe's entire kit prevents looping, 1x has projectiles that go through walls, and Noli also gets looped pretty easily. But compared to Sixer, they have nothing. The massive size makes it easy to bump into corners that give survivors distance. They have the slowest run speed they share with 1x, and they keep getting nerfed! All you really have to counter looping is to either be enraged and land your scream for the speed boost, or to use your janky ass jump to try and land on the looper. Both of these being extremely high risk, may reward. Not even mentioning how map dependent this all is, it seriously doesn't matter how awesome this kit is on paper. Now that this killer has been out for over a month, everyone knows how to counter Sixer now, and until the devs rework or buff them, I'm sorry, actual bottom tier killer, miserable to play as. At least that was the last killer though. My goodness, this video has been going on for way too long. Are you shitting me? Haha, Jonathan, I am killing you with my broken kit. I can't do a Dracula voice. You know, this video has passed about 5 deadlines by this point. Oh, this video's never coming out, dog! The actual latest killer to come out was actually a surprise. His release coming at the end of the 2025 Halloween Masquerade event, being Forsaken's first original killer to be in the game, Nosferatu. Roughly being based on an older Roblox package, Nosferatu is a vampire with appropriately themed abilities, everything like having Slasher's Blade effect, levitation, and... I'ma need another sparkling water. Let's start simple. Nosferatu's Mouse 1 is a simple well-telegraphed swipe of his claws, dealing 24 damage with no side effects. Though the hitbox on this definitely feels a bit generous. And this unfortunately is already when things get a bit ridiculous. As, despite Nosferatu's decent speed of being just slightly faster than John Doe, our vampire here has quite a lot of ways to attack survivors from a distance. His most flashy being his Q, Bloodhook. After a sharp windup of about a second, Nosferatu throws a hook 115 studs from wherever he's looking, where, if a survivor is hit, deals 15 damage and prompts a 1v1 minigame between you and the hook survivor. On both screens, a time-based prompt begins, as the survivor is slowly poured towards Nosferatu, with successful killer inputs making it harder for a survivor to escape, and successful survivor inputs allowing you to break out of the minigame. The survivor winning it grants them immediate freedom, and gives Nosferatu helpless for 4 seconds. However, the survivor getting fully pulled in lets Nosferatu kick the survivor in the gut, dealing an extra 20 damage, but thankfully gives them slowness and helpless for 4 seconds to let the survivor build some distance. This minigame doesn't always prompt though, as if a survivor is hit up close, no minigame plays, but the resulting kick only does 3 damage instead of 20. Like I said, a bit ridiculous, but this kid is only going to get stronger and stronger. So why not give this silly vampire debatably the best ability in the game? Because his E, Cataclysm, such a stupid kid, man. After going invisible for about a second, Nosferatu is able to dash at a crazy high, controllable speed, leaving a very visible trail behind it before it explodes. This explosion does 10 damage while also leaving a trail of bloody puddles for 12 seconds, where if a survivor steps on one of these puddles, are subjected to 12 points of damage via bleeding 2, slowness 2 for 4 seconds, and their location highlighted for the vampire. Not broken at all! Seriously, this ability is stupidly good and fun to use, mixing Void Rush and Digital Footprint together for easily Nosferatu's best ability. Though it is extremely worth noting that after this initial explosion, Nosferatu is teleported back to when he first procced the ability, allowing for survivors to potentially gain tons of distance if not properly trapped. But is that enough for a vampire here? No. To give him another projectile, his R, Hunter's Feast, has Nosferatu throw a bad projectile from where he's looking, dealing only 5 damage to hit survivors. Very low, but also gives survivors 2 pretty harmless effects. Landing a hit does grant Nosferatu invisibility and undetectable for 10 seconds, but really that doesn't matter, as landing this ability allows you to do 25% extra damage to the hit survivor. And as a finisher, I guess. Yeah, pretty weak ability overall, but as we move on to his last ability, yeah, it's the one that lets him fly. Ascension is really the cherry on top of this broken kit, as when you press T, you transform into a bat for 10 entire seconds. Yeah, you can straight up just fly with this ability, Flappy Bird style. You not only go quite fast, but you also burn 0 stamina while transformed, or given the auras of every survivor, and this ability can also do damage. If you press mouse 1 while as a bat, you perform a diving attack, where if you're able to land on a survivor, deals a total of 35 damage after a short animation. Though there is a very notable sound both when you transform and do a dive attack that every survivor can hear, where a missed dive attack gives Nosferatu slowness and helpless for a few seconds. But even with how telegraphed this is, this ability and this kit as a whole is broken. Seriously, I know I said 1x is the best killer, but now with all the nerfs and bouncing my boy has gotten, can it please be this guy's turn on the chopping block next? I'm not trying to say that you can't beat this guy as a survivor, as you most definitely can. Getting good at the Bloodhook minigame, knowing how to avoid getting trapped by Cataclysm, and dodging his dive attacks are things you'll get better at over time. but it's just the sheer amount of options this damn vampire has that just makes him so overwhelming to go against. And I pray that what I listed ages horribly fast. Seriously, expect some major nerfs for this guy after the holidays. My wishlist being, don't let the blood puddles give slowness, or nerf the slowness at least, have Nosferatu join Cool Kid as being a killer with no X-ray abilities, and most importantly, have him drain stamina while flying. It's ridiculous that you can just be a really fast bat on the floor and just make survivors waste stam. Like, jeez, man. If you do play Forsaken, don't feel bad for dying against this guy in this current state. Treat it like Speed 3 1x. We just gotta wait for the devs to properly balance this bad boy. Though, I can't lie, he is pretty fun to play. Just nerf him a bit, please. Post-production soldier here with a small addendum. I was apparently very wrong, because they buffed them. A couple times actually. This is pretty damn surprising. I know I haven't really played or grinded the game since I first got Nosferatu in early December. That candy grind was soul-sucking, oh my god. But despite being rusty for months when I needed to get some more footage, Nosferatu is still stupid good? Apparently the community thinks he's weak or something. I don't know. If anything, Nosferatu out of any killer needs a complete overhaul of their kit. As even though the 1x rework made him a real threat again, Nosferatu still easily is the strongest killer. But turns out no one plays him. Maybe I'm out of my depth here, but if someone in the comments who actively plays the game can tell me how this guy hasn't been nerfed to the ground yet, I'd like to know. Alright, that certainly took a bit of time to go over each killer, but surely it wasn't that long, right? Moving on to what you'll be playing as in most rounds, survivors. Tasked with surviving against one of the menaces we just went over, each survivor brings their own unique kits and abilities to the table to help themselves or their teammates last just that much longer. There's currently 11 survivors in the game, and each fall into their own archetype as I've stated before. But as we go over each survivor, you may be wondering which survivors are objectively good or bad. And although I'll be down to rate or rank where I believe each survivor would land on a tier list, 2 out of 3 of my last major projects directly involved ranking and tier list in some way. So I'm not going to directly rank which survivors are better and which ones are worse. Instead, going for a more apt threat rating system to help you killers out there know who to look out for. So preemptive sorry me putting your survivor main at the top of the list here leads to more killers targeting you first in a round. I guess you have tons of practice to get better at juking. I'm joking of course, but to be honest a little, you shouldn't expect to live every single round. Every killer by default outclasses you in all base stats, and many killers have busted abilities as we've just gone over. But even if you do die a terrible death, as long as you make the killer waste a precious second chasing you, and if you at least try to do your survivor's job, then you shouldn't beat yourself up over not being able to loop the killer for 4 entire minutes. As like I said with general killer tips, don't take a single round's result so seriously, especially if you're the only decent player on your team. And I emphasize this as I've seen many players complain and cry about how they mix the killer for 2 whole minutes just for their whole team to die in 2 seconds. And yes, although this can be frustrating to feel like your death and effort was in vain, this is kind of a loser mentality to have, especially for a Roblox game. Perhaps it's just me, but if you as a survivor can last even a full minute during a chase, that to me should be a sign to take the interaction as a victory for you. Last man standing is at a minimum 75 seconds long, so even in cases where you do meet a grisly end, take pride in your survival time, because if you really let it, this game can and will suck all of the joy out of you. I want all Jason users shot dead in an alleyway by the full stop office without spirit logic rank. I've seen too many people in-game and online who have been left as a bitter, toxic mess because they expect perfect coordination and teamwork with random middle schoolers. Players who make a boogeyman an excuses for their ego when they end up dying, always pulling the targeting card or sweat card when things don't go their way. Accepting your failures is vital to enjoying any game really, and honestly, even if you aren't the best survivor or player, at least making an effort to use your character as intended is literally all I ask for when joining a pub. Of course, some survivors do require more teamwork than others, but most of these set survivors usually have indicators to when someone is requesting for you to use one of your abilities. And please, if you are playing one of these characters, just give your fellow survivor what they want. I really don't care if it makes me toxic or the type of player I literally just described, but if you're playing a survivor like Elliot and I ask you for pizza, where you just proceed to give me that fluoride stare before walking away when I'm the only hurt survivor alive out of 3, and it causes us to lose because you wanted to hear a custom last man standing theme, I don't care, I'm calling you a pig! But that's enough of my lecture. I'm sure you all pick up what I'm putting down. Let's just go over some of these survivors, shall we? What was once everyone's starting survivor, and the first of currently 3 survivalists in the game, is the classic Roblox Noob. Set with them are 3 abilities that on paper are super easy to understand, but with each one having loads of outplay potential that led to some discourse a few months back if Noob is really the best survivor for each player to start off with. The first of these abilities being a Bloxy Cola, though not the ones found around the map, as this one only gives speed 1 for 10 seconds instead of speed 2, with the trade-off being that Noob's Bloxy has a much shorter activation time compared to regular Bloxys. Noob's Bloxy now also has a much longer cooldown of 50 seconds between each use, thanks to Noob's somewhat recent rework that I'll get a bit more into later. The only other tech worth mentioning about Noob's Bloxy is that it has the extra ability of getting rid of any slowness stacks you may have, which, although doesn't sound too useful, it has the potential to completely counter 1x's entanglement.
Oh. How did you instantly get out of that?
That's right! Noob's Bloxy Cola removes all negative status effects.
Oh,
I forgot about that. Yeah, you can just get out of route instantly.
If you can drink a Bloxy right after you get hit by an entanglement, the crippling slowness that move gives you will instantly vanish the moment speed 1 kicks in, basically negating any distance the 1x might gain on you while you're entangled. And yes, although the 1x still gets speed 2 and chip damage on you for getting the hit, this small little tech can give you that little extra time that you might need to win a round. Noob's next ability is also another drink, this one being a Slate Skin potion, where drinking it turns your skin into stone for 6 seconds, drastically lowering your speed but also giving you 80 points of overheal. This ability is intended to be used in 3 main ways from what I've seen. The first being the obvious of being used to ice the final seconds of a round or of last man standing, as you basically get 6 seconds of invincibility that you can use to glow in front of the killer in the final seconds of the round. The second main way being slightly more niche and really being the only way a noob can help their team, being the ability to body block the killer and tank hits from Cool Kids Pizza Boys. But besides that, yeah, sorry. Your only real responsibility is playing flow free while your team perishes around you. The final main way is if you're currently seconds away from dying and you're running out of stamina, where drinking this can be used to gain all your stam back while you awkwardly stare at the killer. This third method, especially pre-rework, didn't really work though, as usually, if the killer had the ability to count to 6, most combated killers can usually time an ability right as the 6 seconds are over. However, with Noob's rework, not only is the cooldown to use Slate Skin reduced to 55 seconds, but now you can actually cancel the Slate Skin effect after 2.5 seconds, introducing some minor mind games with the killer as to if you'll free yourself early or let it naturally run out. Manually freeing yourself does have a small drawback of only giving you speed 1 for 2 seconds instead of the usual speed 2 for letting the effect wear off naturally. But this small change has clutched up for me time and time again. Just as long as you aren't going against a competent slasher or 1x, since both have access to making you helpless, preventing you from manually freeing yourself and most likely ending in you meeting a well-deserved grisly end.
Oh wait, oh wait. No, the counter, no, no!
Noob's final ability is their Ghost Burger, where after a short eating animation, grants Noob undetectability and invisibility 4 for 10 seconds, being best used when doing a generator or predicting when a killer might use a wall hack ability. As, like I'll say when I cover L7, most killers usually use their wall hack ability right after they kill someone, so I'd recommend building that habit as you play.
Dude, that f***ing easy, boys.
The invisibility is also nothing to scoff at, as unless the killer has an ultra bright monitor, telly, it genuinely is pretty hard to see with this effect on. That is, unless they hear the very loud ghost sound this makes when you eat it. So make sure not to eat this when you're near a killer, especially if they don't even know that you're there.
Dude, that's so loud. So loud.
Oh, look at my shirt. Look at my shirt.
I never would have known you were there. I never would have known you were there if you didn't pop it.
You didn't even look at my shirt! Overall, Noob's Kit is very good at keeping you alive, and it always has been pretty good at that. But also like his fellow survivalist 07, Noob has a very selfish playstyle, as the only way you can really help your team is by doing generators or using your slate skin to body block or tank minion hits, as I've stated before. However, as I mentioned a couple times already, Noob's Bloxy and slate skin rework has turned a pretty good survivalist into an actual force to be reckoned with, giving their fellow survivalist in 07 a good run for his money for who's the best survivalist in the game. As before, Noob actually had a limited amount of uses for both their Bloxy and slate skin, with both abilities being capped at 2 uses. And although this made Bloxy spamming really easy to do and made Noob an absolute pain in the ass to deal with the last man standing if they still had both Bloxys, what would usually end up happening is the Noob would be really stingy with their Bloxys since they wouldn't want to waste an ability they can only use 2 times, where their stinginess would then get them in trouble and cause them to die without ever using any of their abilities. I say this because who I'm talking about here is me. This kept happening to me. But now with both slate skin and Bloxys having an infinite amount of uses, you're free to be as selfish and greedy with your slurps as you wish, strengthening Noob's survivability in the middle of a round, while nerfing their last man standing ability slightly. Yeah, for as great as a rework as this was, there was a slight change with how Noob interacted with the usual Bloxys found in the map, where now you can't cheese last man standing by drinking your speed 2 Bloxy, followed by your 2 regular Bloxys, and finally your slate skin to ice the game. As now, drinking a speed 2 Bloxy uses up your regular Bloxy ability, and drinking a speed 2 while it's on cooldown only grants speed 1, unless the cooldown is at 20 seconds or less, which sucks a little bit, but overall, this is super fair with how much more of a threat Noob is now. So with their recent rework granting Noob much more consistency and outplay potential with their slate skin, it bumps them up to a solid 3 out of 5 on the threat list. Just make sure they are left for last man standing and you should be good. That is, unless they are an actual noob, usually being able to tell by their playtime, but since there's apparently tons of people too insecure to show off their playtime and wins, you're honestly better off looking at their playstyle or if they have a fancy noob skin on. Wait, looking at their skin and making an assumption about the type of player they are? Almost like a stereotype. Oh my god! Wait, actually, no. I'm not falling for that trap. I'm not becoming a Forsaken YouTuber, no. Unless this video does really well.
Elliot.
The mascot of the famous Roblox game, Work at a Pizza Place, is next with Elliot, a support survivor who, even though I said I wouldn't be ranking survivors, is easily the strongest survivor in the game. Elliot's entire shtick is being a frontline healer, being alerted to any survivor taking damage through his Deliverer's Resolve passive. This is intended for the Elliot to run to the injured survivor for their primary ability to throw a slice of pizza, where upon consumption, heals 15 health up front and 20 additional health over the course of 2.5 seconds. This healing can be buffed through his second passive of Order Up, adding an additional 5% healing buff to his pizzas for every generator done, giving you another reason to be a malice goblin like me. Just make sure if you see an Elliot giving you pizza to actually eat it, even if it's on the ground. 25-second rule and all. Hell, the pizza is now even highlighted for everyone to see if you're near it, since apparently 60% of Forsaken players have cataracts and can't see a glowing pizza right beside their feet. So that's why it's super important if you're an LA main to practice direct hits on the run with your pizza, as not only will this make you beloved in your server and keep your fellow survivors alive a lot longer, but it also prevents you from accidentally becoming a terrorist and throwing your pizza in a lake of poisoned water. And even if an Elliot is being extremely stingy with their pizza handouts, they are usually encouraged to actually do their damn job with their only self-preservation ability in Rush Hour, granting Elliot speed 3 for 3 seconds upon activation. Elliot already starts with a Rush Hour charge at the start of each round, with the ability being able to be recharged by feeding anyone that also isn't an Elliot. All this combines to make Elliot your team's most valuable survivor, a fact that is made apparent with how often these guys are targeted in each round. And this is for a very good reason. Elliot's pizzas are some of the biggest headaches you can get while playing killer, extending chases greatly and even icing some games if an Elliot is allowed to live for that long. So that's why I say when going against a team with an Elliot, you follow my handy dandy guide of kill the Elliot, 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 kill the Elliot. I did say these guys are targeted a lot, where 40% of these targetings are done by me personally because I hate Elliot. This damn pizza boy has costed me so many killer games, as you might think that saving a support survivor with the max HP of 80 and a charge ability with 1 max charge in Rush Hour would be perfect. but it just never works. Unless the team you're going against are made up of actual lobotomites, never risk trying to save these guys for last man standing. There's a reason I'm giving these guys a risk rating of 6 out of 5. The moment you see this pizza boy, it should be on sight. Thomas got nerfed. Deserved. It doesn't matter if they complain about targeting. Trust me, killing these guys first makes playing killer so much more bearable, and it's just common sense to take out the best healer in the game as early as you can. Luckily, for some reason, Elliot always find a way to encounter the killer first. Like, seriously, these guys are the equivalent of moths flying to the sun in every round, I swear to God.
Shedletsky.
The first sign I'll be covering is everyone's favorite old Roblox admin, and my personal favorite Twitter ragebait account, John Shedletsky. Wielding only 2 abilities, Shedletsky has a stupid easy kit compared to his fellow Sentinels, where, alongside his now free price, makes the former Roblox admin one of the biggest noob traps in the entire game. You'll see what I mean as we cover his signature ability, his linked sword slash, where after a windup that takes forever, Shedletsky slashes directly in front of him with what feels like a pitiful hitbox. But if by some divine miracle his slash actually hits the killer, they're stunned for 3 seconds while providing some resistance stacks to Shed in case there's a trade-off. Now, on paper this sounds pretty good, and that's where the noob trap begins. As what happens is, a new player will be playing with an actual good Shedletsky, and either by spectating them or going against him as killer, we'll see as they pull off stun after stun, completely mocking the killer and looking like a badass the entire time. Cut to the newer player playing Shed themselves, thinking about all the sick clips they'll pull off by saving Elliots and clutching last man standings. Just to realize how little range his slash is, how punishing his whiffs are, and just how easy it is for killers to predict when you'll use your slash. This unfortunately makes up about 95% of Shedletsky's currently in the game, that being utterly useless at their job, since holy hell his sword is not meant for protecting others. Unless you have the foresight of an oracle, trying to use your sword to stun a killer not actively chasing you will either cause you to completely miss, or have the killer just run right by you with how long the windup is. But sometimes you do encounter the rare 5% of Shedletskys that are actually good at the game. Much like my case when I first started playing with a small group of guys, with this freaking guy in here, Mr. Telly Takes. Wielding the best Elliot and Shedletsky I have ever gone against, this guy just understands Shedletsky so damn well, understanding that Shedletsky is most effective while being chased, being able to more accurately predict the killer's movements for a stun, usually around corners and such, as the amount of Shedletskys that swarm the killer like flies trying to get that 6 stun off is ridiculous, and usually just ends with a whiff and a punish, where, thankfully, Shedletsky's only other ability is what ultimately saves his character, that being the 2-charge self-heal of fried chicken, restoring 5 health up front and 35 health over the course of 10 seconds, being easily the best self-sustain any character currently has in the game. It is worth noting that this overtime heal can be stopped if any damage is taken, and it has a lengthy cooldown of 70 seconds between its 2 uses. Yet, it still makes the Shedletsky brain style of play still somewhat valid, since you can just heal any boo-boos you get while playing like an absolute dumbass. Overall, Shedletsky is easily the weakest Sentinel in the game, yet still has loads of outplay potential and great self-sustain. Just make sure to follow Telly's more patient and selfish playstyle, and you should see much better results than the usual Shed playstyle of being a terrorist to your team. So unless the Shedletsky you're going against is part of the 5%, it's safe to put Shed's risk rating at 2 out of 5, since the average Shed you'll be going against will often embarrass himself trying to stun you, which inevitably leads to countless clips of Shedletsky in memoriam. Based on the main protagonist of the Roblox series, The Last Guest, follows our next Sentinel in Guest 1337. And unlike Shedletsky, Guest is actually pretty damn good at his job of being this game's equivalent of a bodyguard, as his entire kit revolves around blocking and absorbing the killer's attacks, while breaking their chase to draw aggro onto them. This role is only boosted with this passive and made to last, giving Guest the second highest base health at 115. And this passive is well needed, with his first and main ability being Block, giving Guest a 2-second period of absorbing any melee attack that hits his expanded hitbox. Successful blocks not only completely absorb a killer's attack, but grant a charge and a Guest signature ability, punching the killer's head smooth off. and this punch has the potential to be extremely strong, where if used within 1 second of a successful block, turns a regular punch into a powerful parry, giving the move a much longer range and turning a 2-second stun into a 3.5-second stun with a much shorter wind-up time. But that doesn't mean that you have to go for parries, as you do have the ability to actually hold on to punch charges. But usually most guests would go for parries, since very few interactions in this game will leave you as euphoric as successfully getting a fat parry off. It is also very worth noting that you cannot block projectiles. It has to be a physical attack, which does include Slasher's Gashing Wound animation, Noli's Void Rush, and Cool Kid's Override. But blocking isn't the only thing guests can do to protect this team, with this other main ability being Charge, acting like a much slower walk speed override, where making contact with the killer will knock them back a bit and prevent them from attacking for about a second. Charge is best used to give supports or any survivor getting chased just a little more distance, or if used on a high up place, to start an impromptu rocket program. However, failing to hit the killer with your charge grants slowness 2 for the duration of this damn math formula for some reason. So if you do miss your charge, try and hit a wall or an obstacle to end it early. Though, even with these abilities, being a proper Sentinel's guest can be a bit tricky, as most of the time, all you can do is use charge and throw out random blocks to try and save your panicked teammates, usually to little avail. Seriously, I know how emotional one can get when playing as guest.
He whiffed his... he whiffed!
As although his stun mechanic isn't the best for protecting supports, I still feel responsible for every fallen survivor I fail to protect, even in clear cases when there was nothing I could do.
No!
Overall, Guest is a pretty good Sentinel. I've been currently maining him as of writing this, and he's very fun to play. However, the average Guest experience ranges from feeling like you're invincible to being one missed block or punch away from instantly dying, as killers have to actually hit you for the block to count, leading to the best way to counter Guest as killer, being the most lethal and devious thing you can do when chasing a Guest. Nothing.
Hey, I tried, alright?
Yeah, seriously. Guest is a survivor entirely built around mind games, from when the killer is actually going to attack or if they'll try and bait out a block, where usually all it takes for the killer to do is the equivalent of startling a cat. Making sudden movements at them, or even throwing out attacks way out to the side, almost always works. Countering Guest also depends on the killer you're playing, as John Doe with this unstoppable parry slither IO combo and 1x being a ranged killer, mopping up most guests with relative ease. Yet for Noli, Cool Kid, and especially Slasher, the mind games deployed against them are some of the most fun interactions you will have in this game, as block counters the majority of these killers' kits. Yet with enough patience and practice, you too can learn how to aim your swipes away from the guest, or dare I say, letting go of Q during Void Rush right as you're about to make contact with the guest. In conclusion, Guest lands at a risk of 3 out of 5, as although they can be decent threats for last man standing, most of the time you'll have Guests swarming you like flies to protect Elliot and other supports, usually giving you some decent opportunities to land some hits on them before you take the time to finish the job. And honestly, similar to Shedletsky, most Guests are easily ignorable, as due to their stun mechanic requiring to get a block off, most of the time you just have to worry about their charge. So unless they're absolutely correct at the game, doing the bare minimum of baiting out their blocks is all you really need to do to curb stop any guests you may come across. The Sentinels keep coming with Forsaken's first original character in 2-Time. 2-Time's character is described as a cultist who gave up everything, including sacrificing their best friend to a false god, which accidentally spawned an online cult for a little while that you may have heard about because time is a flat circle. Regardless, 2-Time's reworked kit entirely revolves around their cultist background, turning what was the most useless character in the game into a Sentinel support hybrid that arguably is just Shedletsky but better. As before they got all this really cool stuff, old 2-Time was a character with literally zero abilities. This is quite literally the only footage I have of me playing pre-reworked 2-Time. Notice the lack of abilities and the bountiful fun I'm having doing literally nothing. The only bone thrown 2 times away was their passive, which gave them a second life after their puny 80 base health was used up, granting them a new base health of 40 health and an altered skin. Yep, that's about it. This only unique thing they had didn't even fully work in Last Man Standing, popping early to give them a max HP of 110. that's somehow still lower than 2 other survivors that are infinitely more useful. Thankfully, this was entirely changed once 2-Time finally got a rework, with their main ability centering around their ritual ability, being able to describe a Roblox spawn symbol anywhere on the map, acting as a spawn point for your second life. However, you now need to earn your second life, the only way being through their dagger ability, lunging forward with a sacrificial dagger to shank the killer, giving them progress towards their oblation bar. Oblation? How the f do you pronounce that?
Ablation.
Oblation.
Ablation.
Okay. Giving them progress towards their oblation bar. Stabbing a killer in the front will temporarily slow and render the killer helpless for a second, while healing you for 10 health and filling the oblation bar by roughly 1/3. However, channeling your inner TF2 spy main and getting a backstab stuns the killer for an entire 3.5 seconds, while healing you for 20 health and filling the oblation bar by roughly 50%. Once this bar is filled out, only then will you get your second life, with it taking either 3 front stabs, 2 back stabs, or 2 front stabs and a back stab to fill out, where, upon death, you will then be teleported to wherever you put your spawn point. Neat! The only other ability 2-Time has in the reworked kit being Crouch, making them the only Sentinel capable of gaining undetectability. And just to give this gremlin even more sauce, this ability can actually be paired with their dagger quite well, as using your dagger while crouched will launch you time quite a distance forward, much like an ambush predator. The crouch can also be cancelled manually if you have to, with you only being penalized if you manually uncrouch far away from the killer. But if you're nearby, no penalty is given for manually uncrouching. Now, you may already be thinking that this kit screams of being used in a stealthy, ambush kind of way, and yeah, that's how 2-Time is meant to be used. But you would be surprised by how many 2-Time players think they're playing Shedletsky with how brazenly they try and backstab you. And this style of play is so easily punished. I mean, all you have to do to counter these morons is just face them. Watch as they waste all of their stamina sprinting towards you just to get a face stab off, where you could then immediately pummel them back into the earth. Like seriously, sometimes these 2-Time mains think they're the hottest shit around, just staring you down and acting all tough. Like I don't even know what this guy's doing here. Okay, yeah, sometimes they do get you, but these trick stabbers are quite rare to see, and 9 times out of 10, they just fly too close to the sun even after you pop their second life. It's also very important that you keep a mental note as to where a 2-Time put their ritual and their current oblation bar, as if a 2-Time is left for last man standing, regardless if their bar is filled up or not, they will always be brought back to their ritual point, healing 40 health and bringing their max health to 110. This makes going against a 2-Time and last man standing a potential nightmare if you aren't ready. Keyword being potential, as sometimes if you go against a killer who knows what they're doing and they find your ritual point, well,
It says I love Urban Shade.
No. Yeah, nice one, dog. That's actually evil tech what I just did right there.
Cringe. Despite this rare occurrence, 2-Time is easily the highest threat sentinel, landing at a risk score of 4 out of 5. That is, unless you know that a 2-Time already has their second life, where a second life 2-Time finally has the honor of being the only survivor at a risk rating of 1 out of 5. As, yeah sure, they still have the capacity to backstab you and heal themselves, but a max health of 40 is a max health of 40, so if you have the time to do so, this strategy almost always guarantees a killer W. Now on to the current second survivalist, brings this cool kit to top the father in Forsaken's lore with 007 and 7. 07's entire kit is based on deception and hiding in the corner for the entire match, where for some reason this style of gameplay is really attractive to me. Like 07 and Noob were the first 2 survivors I got to level 100, despite survivalist gameplay basically being this 80% of the time. Yet, it's for a good reason, as not only do I not trust a lobby full of random children to be good allies, but it's usually in the same lobby where a skilled 07 like myself is able to thrive. 07's main ability is also tied to his passive and another side ability, these 3 being his Dex passive and his clone/inject abilities. All Dex does is show the 07 the further survivor spawn point from wherever he is, tying directly to his other abilities such as clone, where, upon use, a clone of 07 spawns and begins running around, where the clone's pathfinding is tied to 07's other ability, inject. Pressing R cycles between 3 pathfinding modes for 07's clones, these being aimless, where, as the name implies, your clone will begin aimlessly running around before collapsing after its 10-second lifespan is up. The second one being pathfind, where your clone will run directly to the furthest survivor spawn you can see via Dex. And lastly, cursor, where, after a second, your clone will follow wherever your cursor is. Kinda self-explanatory. Realistically, Inject is going to be set to Pathfind 90% of the time, as it's your best shot to properly fool the killer that your clone is actually you. Mostly thanks to your clone ability giving you invisibility and undetectable for 4 seconds. Though, it's very important to note that being able to trick killers entirely depends on their skill and knowledge level, as newer players and iPad babies will usually always fall for the most basic tricks, with most intermediate and advanced killers usually being able to tell when a clone is a clone. So that's why I always say, when using your clone ability, you have to do the following. 1. Make sure to break line of sight with the killer when activating it. And 2. Don't follow the clone or try and run past the killer when invisible. Seriously, you'd be surprised how many 07s die instantly because they end up failing one of these 2 simple things. And yes, although in the middle of a chase, I also have been the victim of panic pressing my clone ability, most of my successes in tricking more competent killers has been from following these 2 simple rules. Though, tricking the killer isn't the only thing this ability is used for, as it's the best ability for countering a killer's wallhack ability due to the lack of windup or animation needed to get undetectability, getting the effect basically as soon as you press Q. 07's other small tech, it involves using cursor mode for your clone, as it can actually be used to clean up John Doe's digital footprints and body block the killer if you're up for it. Though, it's worth noting that if you do clean up John Doe's due to feces on the ground, the John Doe still gets a 10-second speed boost, so just a heads up. Unless you don't care about your team. But then again, there's probably a reason why you're playing 07 in the first place, huh? I mean, you can also use cursor mode if you're on one hit to try and lock the killer into a kill animation, since the clone does mimic your current health, but it's usually not worth the effort from what I've seen and tried. And lastly, the ability that makes 07 the undisputed king of last man standing, his cool GUI ability. After a long windup of 6 seconds, 07 teleports to the furthest survivor spawn from him, with the ability being cancelled if any damage is done to you, being similar to medkits, with it also being cancelable if you start working on a generator while it's active. So, cool niche tech, I guess? This single ability makes dealing with 07 the biggest nightmare in Last Man Standing, as usually these guys will be in a faraway corner of the map, where as soon as you run all the way to them, they've already teleported across the other side of the map, bleeding up to half of the Last Man Standing time, depending on the map and the initial distance between the killer and 07. Combine this with the endless outplay potential of his clones, and it only makes sense to put 07 at a risk rating of 4 out of 5. Never leave these guys last. The only other support survivor you could argue is better than Elliot is the big man David Bazuski himself, Builderman. And don't worry, this variation of Builderman doesn't protect pedophiles. Set with the base health of 90, Builderman's kit is practically ripped from the TF2 engineer, armed with a sentry and health dispenser. Placing down either of his buildings takes 6 seconds to do so and leaves Builderman very vulnerable during construction. But with how impactful and powerful his constructions are, please try to keep him alive, Sentinels. Builderman's sentry targets the killer in its range, dealing a bit of damage but more importantly, giving the killer slowness too while being hit. This nuisance is usually enough to get the killer to target the sentry specifically, so when placing down a sentry, it's best to place it down in corners away from the middle of common looping spots, as to try and get the killer to go out of their way to break your sentry, giving you just a little extra distance while running away. The sentry does only have 30 health, so 2 hits from any killer will break it, but that also means 1x's mass infection will one-shot it, so I'd recommend placing your sentry in a vertical spot when going against 1x. The other building Builderman has is a dispenser, healing 1 health a second to anyone sitting near it, often best built in faraway corners and high-up locations for hurt survivors to run and crowd towards. You can only put 1 sentry and dispenser down at a time, though placing a new building while one is active will destroy it. It usually doesn't matter, but if you know or see a fellow survivor using your buildings, it's best to hold off until they're not being used. And, much like Elliot's pizzas, you're actually able to see Builderman's buildings from far away. And, like I'll say once I cover Taph, please use these buildings. The cooldowns for his buildings are pretty short, and these buildings can and will save your life. as you probably aren't a mixing god, so just swallow your pride and let the support survivor support you. It's also worth noting that you as Builderman can see the range for both of your buildings, with you or any other Builderman not being able to build directly next to one of his buildings, with his sentry having a much larger no build zone compared to his dispenser. So if you want to set up a nest with your sentry and dispenser close together, build your dispenser first, then your sentry. And that's about it for Builderman. Despite having a very simple kit, Builderman lands at a risk rating of 5 out of 5. You really don't want to keep these guys alive if you can help it, since if you beat them up real good and just let them escape, they're just gonna run across the map and heal with their dispenser. So if you got a Builderman low or see a visibly hurt Builderman, I recommend just tunneling them unless you're actively chasing an Elliot. Builderman's buildings do all conveniently die when you kill the creator, so you don't have to worry about finding his buildings after you cut him down. And it's for these reasons why leaving a Builderman for last man standing is usually never worth it. Though, like Elliot, if you can train kills really easily, if the Builderman is obviously new, or if the whole lobby just sucks, Builderman's only true defense is his sentry, making a max 90 health survivor your final victim an interesting proposition for last man standing. However, it's up to you for how long you can put up with this annoying sentries and dispensers reverting any damage you put out. At last, we reached the final playable character who's based on a real person, this one being based on Roblox's retired technical director, m.A.A.d. Dusekkar is a support survivor that specializes in far to medium range support by giving his fellow survivors resistance, speed, and overheal. Granted, the Dusek can actually aim, getting into his most notable ability being spawn protection, where Dusek can support a survivor up to 95 studs away to give them resistance 4 for a max of 3.5 seconds. This basically makes the person he's bubbling invincible, unless they're at 1 HP, then oh well. This ability is best used if a survivor is in a killer's animation like Slasher's Gashing Wound or Noli's Void Rush, as the usual massive damage received from these attacks are greatly reduced if you can give them the bubble on time. It is worth noting that the bubble does have a very noticeable trail leading to the Dusek, so make sure to be alert when bubbling someone, since 9 times out of 10, the killer will try and target you if you're in sight, or the person you're bubbling will for some reason run right towards you. And maybe it's then super understandable why no one plays this guy.
Whatever, no, dude, just die, dog.
The only other thing worth mentioning about spawn protection is that line of sight with your cursor is needed to uphold the bubble. And if line of sight is broken for 2 seconds, the bubble will instantly break. Seriously, this thing kind of sucks now after his rework. The only other ability Dusek has is his Plasma Beam, where after a 2-second windup, zaps a beam that aids allies and slows down killers. If you hit a killer with it, they'll get slowness 2 for 3 seconds, whereas if a survivor is hit, they'll get speed for 4 seconds and 20 points of overheal. Not too bad, but still kind of weak. Yeah, I'm honestly not too much of a fan of the Dusek rework. He still easily is the weakest support, which is crazy because this kid is honestly super solid for helping his team. It's just that no one protects Dusek in public lobbies, and Dusek remains as the only support survivor with no self-sustain or ability to defend himself. The Plasma Beam has too long of a windup and slows you down, and spawn protection can be used on yourself. All you really got is your levitation passive, which makes it so that you don't have footsteps. That's really about it. Dusek really is just a nuisance, but still one you want to deal with when you have the chance. Yet, with how weak he is with his rework, and the skill required to even be effective as him being considerably high, lands Dusekkar at a 3 out of 5 risk rating. Seriously, these guys are pitiful in last man standing. We have finally gotten to my main. I have quite a lot to say about Taph, so let's not waste any time. Taph's entire kit and playstyle revolves around setting up 2 types of traps: tripwires that inflict slowness and reveal the aura of the killer, and subspace trip mines that disorient the killer. Taph's tripwires are actually pretty damn strong, starting by placing them down on one end and being able to be placed quite far on another end. Remember kids, green is good and red is bad. Once placed, they'll slowly become less visible over the course of the 80 or so second lifespan they have. If activated by a killer, their aura is revealed to all nearby survivors and they receive slowness 2 for 4 seconds. Taph can place up to 3 of these down at a time, and unlike a certain support survivor someone glazes, Taph's traps still stay up even after death, but the tripwires don't even pale in comparison to Taph's iconic subspace trip mine. After an arming animation and throwing it forward, the mine waits for its victim, where, if triggered by a killer, gives them subspace 3 for 5 seconds, or, in other terms,
Dude, that's so annoying.
yeah, pretty bad. Not to mention that this gives 5 seconds of helpless? That's almost as long as Noob's slate skin, potentially icing games and saving the skin of himself or of his fellow survivors. Even just having this knowledge and actually using Taph's traps that you can now see through walls can help you get that extra generator puzzle done.
Wait, man, you're gonna have to wait 5 seconds.
Not even mentioning that Taph gets a mine every 40 seconds, and if one successfully hits, the cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. However, I do have to note that the mines only have a lifespan of 50 seconds, and every 13 seconds or so, they reveal themselves by glowing. And you, as Taph, can also be affected by your own mines, but that's honestly whatever. Taph, if they know what they're doing, can set up complete dead zones for a killer, either for himself or for his allies to use. But here's where the good Taphs differ themselves from your average Taph. You see, as the self-proclaimed best Taph player in the world, there's only about maybe 11 other good Taph mains out there that have actual good trap placements and don't just recreate that one meme of the Taph pigeon with the shitty nest. The secret to good trap placements is simple, if not very knowledge-based depending on the map you're on. For tripwires, prioritize common looping spots, darker areas, bushes, and wide paths and floors to hide your wires. As it's important to note that your traps can be broken and most killers aren't gonna fall for whatever bull this is. For your mines, they can serve several purposes, either as time wasters or actual traps. I much prefer the latter in my opinion, where effective trap placements involve tight corners, usually not giving the killer enough time for the impending boom to happen. But I have to say, and you must close your ears for this, as much as I love this character and this kit, Taph is ridiculously easy to counter. I know! But honestly, since good Taph mains are as common as dodo birds in the 21st century, most Taphs are the literal embodiment of the pigeon meme, having awfully placed traps in the middle of the map that they think they're invincible in, just for the killer to break off his wires and fake out the trip mine in another 5 seconds. Hell, you don't even have to bait out the trip mine, as if you hit the mine right before it explodes, it only gives you subspaced 1, which just sends you screen purple and gives you no helpless. Seriously, pretty easy to counter. But don't let that stop you from playing Taph. He's easily the best support for last man standing, as there's tons of cheeky wire spots I found that usually always work, with this spot in Yorick's being my absolute favorite. My final tip I'll give for my beloved main is to never ever heavily rely on these traps. That is something Builderman does have over Taph, as if you play your hand too strong, you'll be left with no traps during a last man standing. As one of Taph's biggest flaws is that he can't really set up on the run. Well, that was until the devs kept giving him buffs. I seriously got this guy to level 100 before any of these buffs were given to him, with Taph's most recent buff allowing for more mobility while placing traps. My goodness, when they add a golden skin for this man. Just go out and play some Taph. Do a cheeky wire spot, set 500 trip mines up, make the killer's life a living hell. Seriously, we need more Taph mains. There's like 60 of us at most. The newest kid on the block is up next with the brand new Survivalist. Being another Forsaken original character, Veeronica differs from her Survivalist brethren by completely investing in her own mobility potential and self-sustain. This is thanks to her background of being a skateboard-loving robot, with throwing a passive being one of the most unique and metal frame. A passive that completely disallows Veeronica from using any healing items, such as medkits, pizzas from Elliot, and Builderman suspensors. Don't ask how she drinks Bloxies though, okay? This is all in exchange for having one of the greatest self-sustain abilities in the game, Activate Battery. Being able to... They killed her. Anyways, Activate Battery works by healing yourself using the battery shown on the top right of your screen, starting each round at 30% charge, and with every 2% of this battery being able to be converted into 1 health. though like most of their healing, it can be stopped prematurely by taking any kind of damage. This includes direct hits from a killer, as well as any kind of damaging status effects, and of course hemorrhage. Thankfully, this battery is rechargeable, being able to gain 8% charge by doing generated puzzles, don't gotta tell me twice, and of course, as true to her skater backstory, doing sick as hell tricks. But Veeronica can't just bust out her skateboard anywhere, with this crucial ability being tied to her Q in Vandalism. By equipping a spray can, Veeronica is able to put graffiti on any surface on the map, taking around 5 seconds to do so, and being able to put up a total of 3 pieces of graffiti at a time. Once a piece of graffiti has been sprayed, you'll be able to see a rectangular hitbox grow from your artwork, and when inside of it, then you'll be able to skate. Upon activation with E, Veeronica begins skating at a whopping 15% faster than her running speed, but draining stamina 35% faster than usual. A pretty bad trade-off, especially with how slow you turn, and with Veeronica taking 5 points of self-damage and slowness by bumping into a wall. Skate also ends by running out of stamina or cancelling the ability early by recasting the ability. But thankfully, there's a lot more you can do with their skateboard besides going slightly faster, as when approaching any collidable surface, Veeronica will begin to glow pink, where, by pressing your jump key, activates her next ability, Trick. Pressing space while glowing pink causes Veeronica to rebound off said collidable surface, granting her 4 stamina, as well as a speed boost and much greater turn control while airborne. Doing 3 tricks during the same skate abilities grants Veeronica a 5% charge, being your only safe way to build charge if all generators are already done. But if Trick still isn't enough to sell you on Veeronica, she still has one more card up her sleeve, or face? Antenna? Whatever, I'm talking about Broadcast. Being similar to 07's Inject ability, Broadcast has 3 different modes you're able to freely switch to that offer massive variations of how to use your skateboard. The first most notable one being Phase, where instead of just crashing into the killer and stopping you dead in your tracks, you're able to phase to the killer while gaining speed 2 for 2 seconds and some resistance in case your foot gets tagged or something. Phasing through a killer also grants 50% battery charge and is honestly your best get out of jail free card when used in tandem with Trick. Especially when this used to give you speed 4 instead of 2. Like, look at these clips. The next channel Veeronica has access to is Bumper, being really the only way to help her team. As with this channel, Veeronica is able to crash into the killer and launch them back, basically being a stronger guest charge. Crashing into a killer also grants V 50% battery charge, though fortunately, if a killer has been bumped in the last 20 seconds, they won't receive the knockback of a second bump, because obviously. The last channel Veeronica has is mobile, whatever, being the most straightforward of giving V much greater turn control during and shortly after performing a trick, though it's very important to note that you cannot switch channels while skating, so make sure to commit to one before pressing E. Overall, all these abilities and micro abilities combine to make a survivalist with a stupidly high skill ceiling. I, alongside many other internet users, have seen some insane movement and routes Veeronica mains have been able to perform. The movement you can pull off with her is frankly insane, and dealing with a good Veeronica can be such a massive headache, though she can be quite easy to counter, as the only way for V to use any of these useful abilities and channels is for her to have a graffiti up, where, thankfully, you can destroy them. This is easily the best counterplay you can have when playing against a decent Veeronica. Smacking any piece of artwork you see in the wall before or after Veeronica starts skating is so damn important. As with V only being able to have 3 graffitis up at a time, and with each spot having to be placed or wiped manually, it really makes these locations of where these graffitis are so important, being a skill best pulled from Builderman, as not only can these graffiti spots be used to build insane distance with phase and tricks, but usually in most cases the killer will go out of their way to break your graffiti, giving you just a little extra distance and letting you know where a killer is with a visual and audio cue. But man, the potential for Veeronica to be broken is there, as even on the first couple of days of her release, you had people like this who had such a great feel for the character and yeah, so Veeronica kinda gets hard counted by half the killers in the game. Okay, it's not as bad as it sounds, but with how much of a stamina commitment using your skateboard is, a walk speed override, demonic pursuit, ascent, and especially void rush can put Veeronica out on the scrap heap insanely fast. Not even mentioning that currently, Veeronica is still a little buggy, mostly with just how janky rebounding with Trick can be, as sometimes tricking can just kinda pop you up in the air or drag you in the wrong direction, wasting the valuable speed boost and putting your stamina game deep in the negatives. But even with these flaws, Veeronica is so damn fun to play. Being able to set up 3 little hidden zones, zooming through the map and having incredible self-sustain is just And even though the jury is still out on her last man standing game, Veeronica lands on a risk rating of 4 out of 5. As having 3 wall hitting graffiti spots to loop around and the best self-sustain in the game, it's best not to f*** around and find out when going against a competent Veeronica. She still is a survivalist after all. As even with the brutal nerf she received, Veeronica is still insanely dangerous in the right hands, being able to be the most annoying survivor to chase and attack if a Veeronica main actually chooses to use Bumper for once. Though, don't grow up thinking that Veeronica is some god defender or something. Yeah, she can do the funny push, but unless you have some madman willing to die for you, she always is a survivalist first.
Nice, thank you.
At last, the final update I need to cover, the ultimate punishment for how long this video took to make, as on March 18th, 2026, Forsaken 12th Survivor released. Jane Doe. The in-universe husband of John Doe, Jane Doe is now the 5th Sentinel to be introduced into the game. Though, as we quickly go over her kit, it's clear that her abilities allow her to do a lot more than just stun the killer. But before we can even play her, I have to talk about the somewhat weird quest you have to do just to unlock her. As Jane Doe isn't a survivor you can just buy in the shop. To play as her, you need to follow a, honestly, pretty easy 4-step quest to unlock her. This whole process starts by speaking to her in the cabin basement, accepting her quest to find document pages of the Roblox admins, and returning to her once you're done. There's 3 admins whose files you need to collect, and each file needs 3 pages to be completed, where document pages can be randomly found in each map. Only 1 document can be collected each round though, so all you have to really do to unlock Jane Doe is to play a total of 10 survivor rounds. Find 3 pages, speak to Jane Doe to activate the next part of the quest, repeat this another time, and for the final part of the quest, being to find her ring and return it to her. This last part of the quest is the only step where you need to both find the item and survive the round with it, as you can collect a document page and die in the same round and it still count. Once this has all been completed, Jane Doe is finally at your service. And on Jane Doe's abilities, it's once again a little complicated for a new survivor. But to best explain her kit, your job as Jane Doe is to stalk, harass, and pester the killer from range before occasionally going in to deliver powerful stuns. With this tracking being very easy to do with her first passive in her own version of Digital Footprint. This passive allows Jane Doe to see the footsteps of the killer, the color dictating how fresh they are until they completely fade out. This tracking meshes very well with the rest of her kit, so to get into her other passive that defines Jane Doe's playstyle, Shatterpoint, I'll try to explain this as easily as I can. Shatterpoint basically works as armor for Jane Doe, adding like a second health bar for her that even has a built-in 40% damage resistance. And this armor is very needed, as Jane Doe actually now has the lowest base health out of any survivor at a measly 60. But with her spawning with 20 Shatterpoint health and with a max capacity of 30, it basically bumps her max health up to 102. But beyond the armor-like nature of Shatterpoint health, its last unique touch is that Jane Doe is able to gain or regain Shatterpoint health by landing either of her 2 abilities. The first of these being Crystal Pitch, an explosive jar that Jane Doe wields that she can use to hurl at either the killer or her allies. By holding down the ability, you can actually charge up the ability more and more, allowing the projectile to go faster, travel further, and have a much larger explosion radius. Hitting a survivor with this restores 2 Shatterpoint health and gives the hit survivor Purified for a few seconds, or basically a rescan resistance buff that gives you more damage resistance the lower health you are. Hitting the killer with it restores 3 Shatterpoint health, pings your location to the killer, and gives the killer Jane Doe's unique affliction, Resonance. This debuff lasts 30 seconds and can be reapplied and stacked up to 3 times, with Resonance's effectiveness being tied to Jando's stun ability, Hatchet. After a somewhat lengthy windup of 0.75 seconds, Jando lunges forward with her Hatchet, similar to a crouch boosted 2-time stab. If a killer is hit with this, depending on how many stacks of resonance they have, gives a wide range of different stun times. If the killer has no resonance stacks, they only receive slowness and helpless for 2 seconds while restoring 5 shatter point health. With 1 resonance stack, the killer is stunned for 2.5 seconds with 10 regained shatter point health. At 2 stacks, the stun is increased to 3.5 seconds and gives 20 regained shatter point health. And at a max of 3 stacks, Jando can deal a 4.5 second long stun and receives 30 regained shatter point health. So yeah, quite a lot of potential for one character, with her playstyle on paper preferring midline play, chucking your jars at every opportunity with its pretty short cooldown, and going in for heavy hatchet stuns once you built enough resonance stacks. This makes going against Jando a potential nightmare, more than any other Sentinel, as I know I said 2-time is the highest red Sentinel, but Jando just stole that crown from them. But there thankfully is a lot of ways to easily counter Jando. The biggest and most obvious one being that the Jando needs to know how to properly aim, wind up, and lead their throws for resonance to be applied. Their kit is very exploitable at short range, their hatchet has a very readable wind up, and biggest of all, Jando's shadow point passive, the armor that Jando so heavily needs to stay alive, has one critical flaw. Anytime Jando reaches 0 shadow point health, she is unable to gain any more shadow point health for 40 seconds, leaving a pretty long vulnerable window of Jando only having 60 base health, giving you the perfect time to strike as killer. But despite these flaws, Jando still lands at a risk rating of 4 out of 5. You really don't want a survivor around handing out resistance to other survivors or having the potential to stun you for almost 5 seconds. Just make sure to keep in mind your resonance stacks and to try and dodge her jars. Doing this and getting in her face before she can build shadow point health or resonance stacks is the best way to neutralize her kit. Finally at our last survivor, and what a guy to finish it off with, Chance. Single-handedly the most fun Sentinel I played in the game. I f***ing hate this character. Chance's entire kit revolves around gambling, from his base health to his stun mechanic. If you pick this character, know that you're signing a contract where you understand that you aren't guaranteed anything in this life. That Lady Luck will simultaneously grant you the powers of a demigod, right before smiting you down for thinking you're some kind of big shot. Starting off with Chance's inherent bullshit as he spawns in. As, like I said, Chance's base health already starts out randomly, spawning in with between 70 and 90 base health. Pretty low for a Sentinel, but that's where the coin comes in. All of Chance's abilities are tied to his coin, where pressing Q gives you a 50-50 chance of either landing heads and granting 1 charge to be used for one of his abilities, or landing tails and giving you a second weakness for 15 seconds. These weakness stacks can literally go on forever, by the way, where weakness is basically just a damage multiplier against you, meaning that having a stupid high meta weakness can make even the most basic attacks lethal even on full health. But let's not worry about that for now. Let's focus on what feels like a 30% chance of actually winning your coin tosses. Landing a heads rewards you with 1 charge, as I've said, with the cap being 3 charges for your abilities. So let's start with his most iconic ability, his gun. Being available with only 1 charge, Chance pulls out a rusty ass flintlock and fires directly in front of him, having a 50% chance to actually fire, stunning the killer from 1 to 4 seconds and scaling weaker the further you are from the killer. But this gun also has a 25% chance to just not shoot, and a 25% chance to... But that's only with 1 charge. Luckily, the chances of successfully firing greatly increases with each additional charge, giving you a 70% chance to fire with 2 charges and a 90% chance to fire with 3 charges. Pretty good odds, but even with max charges, you still aren't guaranteed a shot, and I played enough Pokemon to know that a 90% chance feels more like a 60% chance. This makes playing Chance painfully inconsistent, as I'm not even mentioning the requirement to actually aim and lead your shots. But with your gun always having that slim chance to just not fire or explode, you'll never fully feel safe firing your 1 shot. But if you thought that was annoying and inconsistent, welcome to the biggest source of Chance pain, his reroll ability.
62!
This ability allows Chance to reroll his base health, picking a number from 60 to 120 randomly, with each charge intensifying your number by 3%, making the health range for 3 charges 55 to 130 base health. Plus production soldier here. So Chance actually received some balance changes when Nosferatu dropped. The devs finally added some semblance of a mercy system for his coins, where now every tiles received boosts your chance of getting a heads by 2.5%, and resetting back to 50% every time you get a heads. The other 2 notable changes being that your gun exploding now also stuns the killer for 4 entire seconds if they're near it. Pretty funny. And oh yeah, reroll got slightly buffed, with his new health ranges being 60 to 130 base health. The biggest buff here, I know. Anyways, back to the video. This is where most of my frustrations with Chance lay, as I usually want to have at least 100 base health when I play Chance, making rerolling something that's either done on my first try, or something that can literally take the entire match just to try and get a base health I like. Seriously, I've spent entire rounds just gambling in a corner, rerolling over and over and over again, just wanting to get something higher than 70, and by the time I finally do, there's like 15 seconds left in the round. But sometimes, God smiles down upon his luckiest gambler, and for how often it feels like RNG hates me, sometimes you just ball out.
God loves me. God loves me.
Chance's final ability is Hat Fix, being his only ability needing 3 charges to use, with this ability removing all weakness stacks from Chance, really only being useful if you have weakness 4 trillion or if the killer is about to be on you. And trust me, it's always safer to just Hat Fix and run rather than trying to outlast the 15 seconds of weakness, where even just a breath on you will result in instant death. All this combines to make what is to me the best Sentinel in the game, if you can get a good reroll early on, and if your gun can actually fire. But being able to stun the killer from afar is amazing. I've saved countless of my fellow survivors this way, as you straight up counter a lot of the killers in this game with your ranged stun. Especially 1x. As if 1x is aiming their mass infection on you and you're able to shoot them before it hits you, the projectile will just phase through you, dealing no damage and leaving the 1x stunned. Literally. And metaphorically.
Wait, what? What?
But despite his many strengths, Chance remains as the survivor where you'll have the highest highs and the lowest lows. There's been rounds where I'm literally untouchable, getting stun after stun off, icing the game while hitting 130 rolls in my sleep. And there's been matches where Lady Luck spits on me and tells me I'm not allowed to participate in the round. So despite this inconsistency, Chance sits calmly at a risk rating of 3 out of 5. Usually, it's best to try and catch these guys early on when they're re-rolling and might not have the most health available. And yet, it was still pretty fun to get this guy to level 100, being my first Sentinel to get to this checkpoint. And like a true temporary Chance main, I celebrated getting level 100 the only way I knew how, landing 5 hits in a row before firing a shot into the night sky, just to hit the 5% misfire chance and killing myself instantly. I am never playing this character ever again. And at last, we finally made it. Every single killer, every single survivor. I should probably learn how to summarize things more efficiently, huh? But that about sums up all the things I wanted to say about this game. It's honestly extremely impressive just how much depth this Roblox game has. And yeah, sure, the gameplay loop and genre aren't for everyone. Obviously, your enjoyment of a game is subjective, but the sheer dedication and passion this dev team has brought to the table has translated into one of my favorite Roblox games of all time. But despite the countless amount of glazing I've done for Forsaken, this game is, far from perfect. And I'm not just talking about the stupid amount of bugs you'll eventually come across. As for as solid as a game that Forsaken is, there are some key issues I see with the game that we're going to need to go over. Starting off with the biggest filter that anyone who decides to check out Forsaken immediately faces, this damn loading screen. Yeah, it turns out all these fancy models, animations, effects, and textures can take quite a while to load for everyone. And even though you can skip this, yeah, it's best to just let it load. Now, to give some credit to the worker bees of this cursed dev team, they have been working on ways to make this load screen faster, and luckily it does feel a lot faster now than it was before the Noli update. But thankfully, many of the smaller gripes I would write here have already been addressed, or at least the devs have promised to look into said problems. Still waiting on that one though. One of these particular problems is still very much present, that being what is to me the single biggest piece of criticism that I believe is 100% valid, being that the new player experience in Forsaken is rough. Now, I was fortunate enough to have my first experience with this game be with my brother and some friends, and despite me not knowing what to do and the usual new player hazing, okay, a lot of hazing, this game intrigued me enough to keep me coming back and to improve at the game. But the same can't be said for many other newer players. And I've also contributed to this problem, as when there's a brand new player and I'm in the middle of getting slashed to level 100, do you really think I'm gonna take it easy on someone who's the freest XP in the world? Which is a shame because I genuinely feel bad ruining the experience and perception of a game that I've become extremely passionate about. And this rough new player experience was one of my biggest reasons to make this video. Now, thankfully, the devs are very aware of this, and I'm hoping to implement what was done for Dead by Daylight, having a very basic tutorial just so that brand new players aren't immediately dropped into a lobby full of players that have several days of experience and who are ready to pummel them into the ground until they rage quit out of frustration. Hello again, post-production soldier back. So this rumor tutorial still hasn't been added as of writing this, though the devs have recently added new player lobbies. Basically just a way to get players under 24 hours of playtime to be matched in the same lobby. The jury's still out on how effective it'll be as of writing this, but hopefully it's a step in the right direction, especially with how high the average skill level has gotten over the last couple of months. But there also is another reason as to why this game gets slandered so heavily online. And although this next problem I'm going to talk about has been fixed for quite a while now, I think it'd be a massive crime if I didn't talk about how god awful this game's hitboxes used to be.
What? No, I snapped back so hard, dude. That's crazy.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Before they tried to address this problem in the slasher update, you could genuinely make the argument that this game was unplayable because of just how egregious some of these hitboxes were. Like seriously, look at this! And these shank hitboxes were always killer-sighted. But this wasn't entirely Forsaken's fault. Now, I'm not gonna act like I'm some expert and I know what I'm talking about, but from what I've seen from the devs, the biggest reason why these hitboxes felt so awful was more of a Roblox issue through its interpolation, rather than the actual hitboxes themselves, as even with Great Pink, hitboxes felt absolutely awful to play with, and everyone, including me, constantly complained about them. But like I said, this was nearly always killer-sighted, as even though say like a slasher head hits you a mile away on your screen, on the slasher screen it looked like a clean hit. Luckily though, as of writing this, I am so happy to say that hitboxes feel a lot better to play with post-slasher update. It isn't perfect, the game feels a bit more laggy now, but honestly, I'd rather take the slight lag over dealing with this again.
Dude, that did not hit me.
And although there are a bunch of tiny nitpicks I have with this game that I could talk about, this video really needs to start wrapping up, and you really want me to talk about it, huh? I can't just go on to a final conclusion? Like, seriously, it has nothing to do with the base game. That's all I wanted to talk about. Fine. Look, I do agree with how much worse this whole situation has gotten. So, it's finally time to address this massive elephant in the room. Alright, so I really didn't want to talk about any of this kind of stuff at all in this video, but with the semi-recent stuff that's been going on regarding the decisions made by Forsaken's current co-owners of Haitoko and Basil, yeah, I really should address this elephant in the room. To give a gross oversimplification to anyone who isn't in the know, when the game first started blowing up and when I first started playing in early March, the owner of Forsaken at the time belonged to a single individual that has plagued this game and its development team, probably forever at this point. Of course, I'm talking about the king of Wingstop himself, Soul Driven Love. Responsible for tons of various damning actions that has unfortunately become all too common on the internet, Soul very clearly was not cut out to be the lead dev of Forsaken. However, due to them having the ownership rights of the game, there really wasn't much the rest of the dev team could do to keep Forsaken going that didn't include everyone jumping ship and just making a new game from scratch. Especially with it looking like that Soul was going to sell the game rights to some big Roblox corporation that would 100% fill the game with microtransaction and pay-to-win garbage that litters most Roblox games. Luckily, a deal seems to have been struck, where Soul stepped down and handed ownership rights over to our two current co-owners, Hytokul and Basil, with a slight catch that would result in quite a major controversy, as it was revealed that the deal made to kick Soul out of the dev team was only agreed upon if Soul was to receive 25% of all revenue the game itself makes. Now, this isn't entirely unheard of. Usually people with ownership rights of a popular thing make bank selling their property regardless of the content of their character. I mean hell, look at Dan Snyder. He completely ruined the then Washington Redskins and was arguably the worst owner in American sports for like over 2 decades. And his punishment for being an egotistical prick that held entire communities both local and national hostage was being paid over $6 billion to f**k off. However, due to Hytokul and Basil's lack of transparency of this 25% thing due to NDAs being involved, it destroyed really any kind of goodwill they might have had with a large chunk of the community. This problem only being worsened when it was recently revealed that several team members, including the head of balancing Kaiser, was still in contact with Soul. Both co-owners were well aware of this, and did basically nothing, only firing Kaiser and any other friends of Soul when public backlash started to pick up against ownership. These dramas have resulted in a small group of players losing interest entirely in the game, and even some lead devs on Forsaken's dev team to quit due to ownership's actions and the harassment they face for just being associated with the game. And it especially doesn't help when the person on the dev team these geniuses decided to promote to replace the person who just resigned was someone who was caught in a recording saying the hard R while drunk. This f***ing ownership group, man. And despite this onslaught of drama, I still believe Forsaken does have a very passionate dev team. The actions of the co-owners don't reflect the worker bees of the dev team, the ones responsible for the gorgeous animations, models, and soundtracks this game offers. So if you were to direct any criticism at this dev team in regard to these incidents, don't harass the people whose job it is to work on this game, please. I'd even say don't harass Basil or Hytokul. I know Twitter likes to paint them as these evil, malicious doers who are enacting the will of Soul to brainwash the minds of children who play this game. But I think that's kind of a stretch. I really just think that Hytokul and Basil are just really bad at their jobs. I don't envy their position at all, but you gotta do better, man. Even with Hytokul's recent Google Docu clearing up a lot of misinformation and rumors that were circulating after the Kaiser incident, it's still just more words and promises. What this community needs to see are actions and tangible results. It's great that these co-owners want to do better, especially with it looking like we're stuck with them for the time being. But this constant cycle of soul drama this game finds itself in basically every month needs to end one way or another. Or else I'll have spent the past 6 months working on a 2+ hour video on a controversial Roblox game that's dead not even after a year it comes out. God help me. I mean, even a worst case scenario does happen, at least Shattered Hopes is looking pretty promising. All these controversies have, like I briefly said, started a pretty sizable anti-fan movement of Forsaken who are quite active online. And honestly, I am scared if they find this video, because if they do, dog, they're gonna crucify me. As I'm not really here to start a discussion on the ethics of choosing whether or not to play a Roblox game. That's a debate to be had on Twitter, and one I have absolutely zero interest in having. Really, I bring all this up as I almost feel obligated to at least inform anyone who still doesn't know about the shady stuff going on behind the scenes of this development team. And I know, pretty awkward to do so after shilling this game for over 2 hours, but especially after the Kaiser situation, my goodness, my original script I finished in early September aged like milk so fast, oh my god. But if you don't want to play or check out Forsaken due to the constant drama this game and its community gets into, I do not blame you at all. My motivation to make this video has been shot several times due to this crap, but kid named Sunk Cost Fallacy keeps getting me to try and finish this behemoth. And if you do pick up Forsaken because of this video, I do implore you to peer into this rabbit hole of Forsaken drama, since I skipped over a lot of damning and frankly crazy just because I don't want my channel to be like a drama slop channel or a X situation is Y type channel. And if you're really asking me whether it's okay to play Forsaken, please refer to my previous statement because I'm not your mom. It's really up to you how you want to spend your time and money. Don't feel obligated to play this game, but at the same time, don't let random people on the internet make you feel bad for playing a fun Roblox game. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, sure, this is a massive cop-out after glazing this game for over 2 hours, but it kind of has to be, simply just because nearly everyone I've seen has a wildly different opinion on Forsaken drama and how the game/community should be handled due to it, as this is still an ongoing legal situation that probably won't have a real resolution until several months, maybe years to fully resolve. This is why I said I'm not your mom. You are your own person. You should be able to look at this messy cluster of drama and Google Docs and use your own morals, principles, and values to come to your own conclusion, rather than having randoms on the internet decide your opinion for you. And as much as I do recommend this game to anyone who's even remotely interested, I do ask you to at least be aware of the drama surrounding this game and why it happened. I'd really hate for people who might be interested or re-interested in the game to play the game just to realize that they were unknowingly, indirectly supporting someone as atrocious as soul-driven love. And even though things have gotten better as of late, with a problematic person on the dev team finally getting the boot, and with the community learning that the thousands of dollars of Robux that Soul has leached from the dev team has to go through several hoops to even be liquidated into real money, Soul is still the biggest reason why this game can never truly heal. And until this pathetic leech can finally be kicked to the curb, Forsaken will unfortunately always be problematic medias. But hopefully this is the only time I have to cover Roblox drama in this series. Damn, why does every big project I do have to involve said game experiencing some kind of controversy? Whatever. This whole segment has been quite the bummer. I still have a couple things I do want to talk about, so hopefully they won't be as negative as it's so over. Yeah, this community is terrible. And I know, vocal minorities and all that, and with a game as massive as Forsaken, you shouldn't generalize and yada yada, and I actually kind of agree with that, a little. As it really feels like there's two sides of this community. The community you'll play with and see in game, and the online community and fandom. And oh my god, these are wildly different. With the former, the in-game community is honestly nothing that bad. It's pretty standard Roblox. You got the people who don't communicate at all, people who make excuses for why they died, cosplayers, and the occasional chill person in there. You also encounter toxic players as often as you would in any other multiplayer game. But at least for me, they're pretty easy to shut up, like, oh wow, great job getting that stun off, champ. Yeah, you're right, it was pretty funny. But usually, it's a pretty chill time if you aren't being an ass to other people. I mean, hell, I've only been told to kill myself 2 times, which is honestly pretty good for a multiplayer game.
Kill yourself.
He told me to kill myself. The only other common annoying person you'll come across is targeting accusers. I really don't know what these people want in an asymmetrical horror game. Like, what the f does targeting even mean? Having a basic strategy to take out healers and supports is just common sense. Or what? Is there an ethical way to murder people I'm just not aware of? The only time it is targeting is if you're specifically killing someone and ignoring everyone else because you have beef with that specific person rather than the character they're playing as. I know this is probably just children getting upset because they lost in the game and are finding a way to mend their ego. I was a lot like that at their age, but now? It is so fun getting targeted. Maybe weaker-minded individuals see this as annoying or against the unwritten rules, but if anything, it's a sign of respect. To know that I'm that much of a menace to be left alive that the killer has to go out of their way just to put me 6 feet under, like, it's exhilarating, man, trust me. And actually being able to go against someone who is also really good at the game is so fun. Going band for band against a good player is the man. It's why playing this game with friends is so enjoyable. But here is where the innocence really ends. As although the in-game community is pretty standard, this online community, fandom, whatever, yeah, it's pretty bad. I've seen just about everything, from general racism and homophobia, harassment campaigns against the dev team, fans of the game genuinely getting upset at a 17-year-old dev for saying the word soon, to people unironically calling for some of the talented producers in this game to get fired because they didn't like one of their tracks. And the list just goes on. Seriously, it feels like there's a new drama about this game like every 2 weeks. At that. It's all pretty damn overwhelming, and it's the biggest reason why I just choose to actively ignore the fandom. This game honestly rocks too hard for a fandom to ruin my enjoyment of it. And there, I talked about it. No, I'm not covering a specific drama, don't ask. This really isn't the type of channel to cover that kind of stuff. Let's just move on to something far more interesting to talk about. The ever so shaky future of Forsaken. Now, like I said way in the beginning of this video, Forsaken is still technically in alpha, despite several major console releases and version numbers. Whatever. The development cycle for Forsaken is still looking pretty slow but steady, as the next killer is all but confirmed to be Azure from 2Time's backstory. Not even mentioning the countless future killers the game will slowly be adding over the coming months and years. Maybe one day, Slenderman Forsaken will be real. But besides that, we've also been given some very interesting things to look forward to in future updates. This not only includes the usual stuff to expect like new skins and recoding to make the game less buggy, but also some intriguing additions like new client-side objectives. Hey, like Among Us! 2 potential new game modes. As on Friday the 13th in March 2026, Slasher was given an entire unique game mode to celebrate his day. And although I didn't get a chance to check it out due to me being busy with this video, the clips I saw of the game mode looked really fun and even a bit scary? This is the kind of stuff I really want to see from Forsaken. Adding game modes like this, and of course some semblance of a tutorial for newer players, should be the next thing Forsaken adds before summer 2026 arrives. All these future promises look fantastic for the health of the game, and I honestly really do appreciate this dev team, especially with everything they've had to deal with over the past 7 months. They're far from perfect obviously, and I of course have my complaints and nitpicks about certain balancing decisions and philosophies around skin and personnel decisions. But honestly, as a dumbass who still plays Clash Royale in the year 2025, oh my god, it could be so much worse. Anyways, enough talking about the dev team and the state of the game. Let's go over what I would really like to see added to Forsaken. Obviously, shout out to the stuff I've already mentioned, but realistically, the biggest things I want to see are as follows. 1. Holy please buff or rework Shed and Dusekkar. Both of these guys feel awful to play as and way too easy against as killer. Most Shed players are completely ineffective and no one plays Dusekkar for a good reason. And no, that 0.5 stat increase for Shed's sword isn't enough. 2. Please add something to do in the lobby. I'm not saying you have to do the Plates of Fate method of adding gambling to the lobby, but I mean that place your bets thing would be pretty cool to see in game. Oh my god, please let me do insider trading. 3. And lastly, please continue to make this game as skill and knowledge based as you can. These games feel like a rarity today, especially among live service games. This game really is something special, and I believe this is one of the biggest reasons why. But that's all stuff that has to do with the actual game itself. Something I failed to mention in this video are skins. There's quite a lot of them, but thankfully most of these are pretty freaking good. But despite my general ambivalence towards this topic, the whole controversy around Forsaken skins is something I'll briefly mention. Long story short, I want the dev team to focus less away from referencing media outside of Roblox, even when it caters to me, but to instead focus more on original designs and Roblox references and crossovers, even if many of these really cool skins have unfortunately already been pulled due to Forsaken's controversial nature. Can't really blame them honestly. You've probably seen a couple of them in the older B-roll segments. May God rest your soul, Roquez, Champion, JX1, you were some damn fine skins. Also, it's like Roquez, Roches, Rochas, if I know. Moving on, I really don't have much skin recommendations besides random references to media I'm a fan of. But, like I said, I'd really just prefer if Forsaken skins stay in the Roblox sphere. Though a jacket slasher skin would be pretty cool. Also, on the more recent topic of Forsaken's usage of 3D clothing, I actually don't mind them that much. My only criticism is I think their usage should be scaled back just a bit. As even though I'm a fan of a lot of these designs, a lot of these 3D clothes just make the characters look really puffy and silly. But with that, I believe now it's finally time to wrap this video up. It's been quite the video. Look, I promise future episodes in this series won't be as long as this video, but I think that just goes to show how much I adore this game. There is so much more I could have talked about, as I've already said, as I'm super interested to see how this game will develop over time. As, like I said in my Bite by Night video, I will briefly be covering Forsaken whenever I get around to making a video going over the Roblox ASIM genre. So, if you made it this far, thanks for sticking around, and definitely make sure to subscribe, like the video, turn on notifications, the works. But with that, this monstrous video can finally come to an end. It's been quite a journey for me these 6 months, but I'm happy I can finally put it all to an end. As if you're able to look past the giant amount of disappointment and controversy Forsaken's ownership group keeps getting into, and are able to look past the cringe that comes with any fandom really. Jeez, this is a lot. Man, there's a reason I took so long to make this video, okay? It really does suck that every time I sat down and worked on this project, it dawned on me that I have really spent 10 months of my life working on a video on a very controversial Roblox game. Look man, I'm not happy about it either, but if you are somehow able to look past all of this, I believe that you too will see that Forsaken is a pretty damn good Roblox game.
Forsaken. We are 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 forsaken.